Hey guys, this is Hogwarts Tale, and here we create the fan fiction story. If you enjoy this kind of fan fiction, so must subscribe the channel for new upcoming video. Now let's start the story.
Greetings, dear viewers. Welcome to Hogwarts Tales. Today's featured story is What If Harry Claimed the Slytherin Regency at age 11 and vetoed every law the Ministry ever passed. Love what we do. Show your support by liking, commenting, and subscribing. Every little bit helps us create more content for you. Let's get started with today's story. Chapter 1, The Weight of a Name. The Goblin looked at Harry Potter the way a surgeon looks at an interesting tumor. "Sit," said the Goblin, whose nameplate read Ironclaw, Senior Account Manager, Ancient Houses Division. He didn't gesture toward a chair. There was only one chair in front of the desk, and it was clearly meant for someone taller, richer, and more important than a skinny 11-year-old boy in hand-me-down clothes 3 sizes too large. Harry sat anyway. The chair was cold marble, and his feet didn't touch the floor. Hagrid had brought him to Gringotts 20 minutes ago, beaming and enormous, and handed him a tiny gold key like it was the most natural thing in the world. Then a goblin in the lobby had taken one look at Harry's scar, whispered something to another goblin, and suddenly Harry was being escorted not to the carts that led to the vaults, but down a side corridor, up a narrow staircase, and into this office with its high ceilings and walls lined with ledgers older than most countries. Hagrid had tried to follow. A goblin half his height had stopped him with a single raised palm and the words, "Account holder business. Private." "But I'm supposed to be, private," the goblin repeated, and somehow that settled it. Now Harry sat in a cold chair while Ironclaw studied a piece of parchment that had appeared on the desk moments ago, already covered in spidery text that was still writing itself. "Mr. Potter," Ironclaw said. "Are you aware that you have never received a single account statement from this institution?" "I didn't know I had an account until about 2 hours ago." Ironclaw's eyes, black and sharp as whetstones, flicked up from the parchment. 2 hours. "I found out I was a wizard this morning. Over breakfast." "Which was a sausage Hagrid sat on." Harry paused. "It's been an unusual day." Something shifted in the goblin's expression. It wasn't sympathy. Harry had never seen a goblin look sympathetic, and he'd only known goblins existed for about 30 minutes, but he was fairly confident it wasn't in their range. It was more like the expression Uncle Vernon got when he found out a competitor had been cheating on their taxes, professional offense. "You were raised in the Muggle world?" "Yes." "With no knowledge of your heritage?" "No." "No contact from your magical guardian?" Harry blinked. "My what?" Ironclaw set down the parchment. He folded his long fingers together. His nails were sharp enough to leave marks on the stone desk, and Harry noticed that they had. "Mr. Potter, standard procedure when a client of your significance visits Gringotts for the first time as a legal minor, is to conduct a routine inheritance audit. This verifies your identity, your account holdings, and any active claims or titles attached to your bloodline." He paused. "Given that you appear to have been kept entirely ignorant of the magical world, I am going to recommend we be thorough." "How thorough?" Ironclaw reached into his desk drawer and produced a shallow stone basin etched with runes and a silver knife that looked older than the building. 7 drops of blood, Ironclaw said. "The basin does the rest." Harry looked at the knife. He looked at the basin. He looked at the goblin, who watched him with those flat black eyes. "Does it hurt?" Briefly. Harry held out his hand. The cut was small and clean, and it did hurt, but not as much as the time Dudley had slammed his fingers in a car door, and not nearly as much as the time Uncle Vernon had grabbed him by the arm hard enough to leave bruises shaped like sausage fingers. Harry watched 7 drops of blood fall into the basin, each one sizzling when it hit the stone, and then the cut sealed itself shut as if it had never existed. The basin glowed. Runes spun along its rim like the wheels of a slot machine, clicking into place one by one. New parchment materialized on the desk, and this time the writing came fast, line after line, filling the page, spilling onto a second sheet, then a third. Ironclaw read the first page. His expression didn't change. He read the second page. His expression still didn't change, but his fingers tightened on the parchment hard enough to crinkle the edges. He read the third page, and then he set everything down and stared at Harry for a very long time. "Mr. Potter," he said. "I need to bring in my supervisor. Is something wrong?" "That," said Ironclaw, "depends entirely on your perspective." The supervisor was a goblin named Ragnarok, and Harry would later learn that he was not merely a supervisor but the director of Gringotts London branch, which meant he was one of the most powerful non-human beings in Britain. He was old enough that his skin had gone the color of tarnished bronze, and he moved with the careful precision of someone who had learned centuries ago that rushing was for people who hadn't thought things through. Ragnarok read the parchment. Then he read it again. Then he spoke to Ironclaw in gobbledygook, a language that sounded like gravel being fed through a meat grinder, and Ironclaw responded at length. Then they both looked at Harry. "Tell me, Mr. Potter," Ragnarok said, and his English was perfect, almost accentless. "What do you know about the man who gave you that scar?" "Voldemort," Harry said, because Hagrid had told him the name and Harry didn't see any reason not to use it. Both goblins registered the name without flinching. "He killed my parents. He tried to kill me. Something went wrong, and he died, or disappeared, or something. Nobody seems quite sure." "And what do you know about his heritage?" "Nothing." Ragnarok tapped a long nail on the third sheet of parchment. "The wizard who styled himself Lord Voldemort was born Tom Marvolo Riddle. His mother was Mara P. Gaunt, last of the Gaunt family, who were the last documented descendants of Salazar Slytherin." Harry processed this. Slytherin. As in, one of the 4 founders of Hogwarts. The very same. Ragnarok's dark eyes glittered. "The founders established more than a school, Mr. Potter. They established a governing framework, a system of magical authority tied to the land, the ley lines, and the ambient magic of Britain itself. Each founder held a regency, the right to govern, legislate, and adjudicate matters of magical law within their domain. When the founders eventually departed, through death, departure, or disappearance, their regencies passed to their heirs." "So Voldemort held the Slytherin regency?" "No. The Gaunt family was aware of their descent from Slytherin, but they never formally claimed the regency. They lacked the knowledge, the resources, and, toward the end, the mental acuity. Tom Riddle likely knew of the claim, but he chose to pursue power through other means. The regency remained dormant. And now?" Ragnarok slid the third sheet of parchment across the desk. Harry read it. Some of the words were in languages he didn't know, and some of the concepts were entirely foreign, but the key passage was in plain English, written in the Basin's magic as a simple statement of fact: Slytherin Regency, status, dormant. Claimant by right of conquest, Harry James Potter. Claim status, valid. Awaiting formal invocation. Right of conquest, Harry said slowly. "You defeated the heir of Slytherin," Ragnarok said. "In magical law, true magical law, the law that existed before ministries and bureaucracies, that transfers all hereditary claims, titles, properties, and authorities. I was a baby. I didn't defeat anyone. I just survived. Magic does not concern itself with intent, Mr. Potter. It concerns itself with results. Voldemort directed the full force of the killing curse at you. The curse rebounded. He was destroyed, or at the very least, stripped of form and power. By every metric that magic recognizes, you conquered him." Ragnarok paused. "You are the heir of Slytherin by right of conquest. And the regency is yours to claim." The room was very quiet. Somewhere deep in the bank, Harry could hear the distant rumble of mine carts. "What does the regency actually do?" Harry asked. Ragnarok smiled. It was not a comforting expression. Goblin smiles never were. But there was something in it that Harry recognized, the look of someone who has waited a very long time for an interesting question. Everything, Mr. Potter. It does everything. The explanation took an hour, and Ironclaw brought tea, actual tea, in a porcelain cup with a saucer, which Harry hadn't expected from goblins, while Ragnarok laid out the history. The four founders hadn't just built a school. They'd built the magical infrastructure of Britain. Wards, ley line junctions, anchor points that stabilized ambient magic across the entire island. The regencies were the control mechanism, each founder held authority over their quarter of the system, and together, they governed magical society. Then Slytherin left. Gryffindor died. Ravenclaw withdrew. Hufflepuff, the last one standing, tried to hold it together, but one regent couldn't manage what was designed for four. The system went dormant. Into that vacuum, the Ministry of Magic was born. Not created by law, there was no law to create it. It simply formed. Wizards and witches organized themselves into a governing body, appointed a minister, established a wizing, and began passing legislation. But here is the critical point, Ragnarok said, leaning forward. The ministry's authority is derived from convention, not from magical law. The founders' regencies were never dissolved. They were never formally superseded. The ministry built its house on land it didn't own, and for 900 years, no one has been in a position to point that out. Until now. Until now. Harry stared at his tea. It had gone cold. You're telling me that if I claimed this regency, I'd have authority over the Ministry of Magic. I am telling you that if you claim this regency, every piece of legislation the ministry has ever passed is, technically, unratified. The Founders' Charter, which is a magically binding document, not merely a political one, requires regent approval for all laws governing magical Britain. No regent has approved anything in 9 centuries. The ministry has been operating on autopilot, and the only reason it's worked is that no one with standing has challenged it. And I have standing. You have standing. Harry put down his teacup. What would happen if I vetoed their laws? Ironclaw made a small sound. It might have been a cough. It might have been a laugh. Ragnarok's smile returned, wider this time, showing teeth like filed iron. Chaos, Mr. Potter. Absolute, magnificent chaos. Harry didn't smile back. He was thinking about Hagrid, sweet, enormous Hagrid, who had been expelled from Hogwarts and had his wand snapped in half based on the word of a 16-year-old Tom Riddle, and who had never been given a hearing, let alone a trial. He was thinking about the way Hagrid had spoken about Azkaban, the wizard prison, with a shudder that suggested horrors beyond imagining. He was thinking about the laws Hagrid had mentioned in passing on their walk through London, laws about werewolves that sounded like they'd been written by someone who thought persecution was a policy position, laws about muggleborns that treated them as second-class citizens, laws that had apparently allowed a man named Sirius Black to be thrown in prison for life without ever seeing the inside of a courtroom. He was 11 years old, and he had learned one thing from the Dursleys if nothing else: people in charge were not automatically good. Systems that claimed to protect you could be the very things crushing you. And the worst kind of authority was the kind that had never been questioned. I'm not going to do anything today, Harry said. I need to learn more first. Ragnarok studied him. Whatever he saw in Harry's face, it seemed to satisfy him deeply. A wise decision, Mr. Potter. The goblins of Gringotts will, of course, provide whatever historical and legal documentation you require. We have extensive records. You've been waiting for this, Harry said. It wasn't a question. Ragnarok stood, adjusting his waistcoat with the precision of a general straightening his medals. The Goblin Nation has operated under magical law, true magical law, founder law, since before the Ministry existed. We have watched the Ministry build its sandcastle for 9 centuries, knowing that one day, the tide would come in. He met Harry's eyes. We are patient creatures, Mr. Potter. But we do enjoy being right. Hagrid was waiting in the lobby, looking anxious and enormous next to a potted plant he was unconsciously crushing with his elbow. Harry. Blimey, I was startin' to worry. What was all that about? Account stuff, Harry said. Goblin procedures. Ah, yeah, they're sticklers for the. Got everything sorted? Getting there. They collected Harry's gold from his vault, a staggering amount of it, though Ragnarok had quietly informed him that the gold was the least significant thing he owned, and emerged onto the sunlit cobblestones of Diagon Alley. Harry bought his supplies in something of a daze. The wand chose him at Ollivanders, Holly, Phoenix Feather Core, 11 inches, and the old wandmaker's silver eyes went wide when he mentioned the curious connection to Voldemort's wand. Harry filed that away. He was filing a lot of things away today. In flourish and blots, he added several books to his pile that weren't on the Hogwarts supply list, A History of Magical Governance in Britain, The Founders and Their Legacy, and Wizengamot Procedure, a comprehensive guide. The clerk gave him an odd look. Harry gave the clerk a polite smile and paid in gold. In Madame Malkin's, he stood on a fitting stool next to a pale boy with sharp features and an attitude like he'd been born on a throne and was merely tolerating the world's failure to provide one. Hogwarts too? The boy asked. Yes. Know what house you'll be in? I'm going to be in Slytherin, of course. My whole family has been. I'm keeping my options open. The boy looked at him properly for the first time, a quick, assessing sweep that took in the bad clothes, the messy hair, and the green eyes behind round glasses. Whatever calculation he was running, it didn't produce a satisfying result. He turned back to the mirror. I'm Malfoy. Draco Malfoy. Harry Potter. The boy's head snapped back around so fast his fitting pins scattered. Harry watched the reaction with detached interest, the widening eyes, the recalculation, the immediate shift from dismissal to evaluation. It was a very instructive few seconds. Well, Draco said, recovering with the practiced smoothness of someone raised to never be caught off balance. That's, well. I hope we'll be friends, Potter. My father says, what does your father do? Draco blinked at the interruption. He's on the board of governors at Hogwarts. And he has the minister's ear. He's very influential in the Wizengamot. The Wizengamot. That's the legislative body. Yes. The oldest families hold hereditary seats. The Malfoys have held ours for, how many seats are hereditary versus elected? Draco stared at him. I don't know the exact number. Most of them are hereditary, I think. Why? Just curious, Harry said. Nice to meet you, Draco. He stepped off the stool, collected his robes, and left the shop. Behind him, Draco Malfoy was still staring. September 1st arrived with the inevitability of all dates that carry too much weight. Harry stood on platform 9 3/4 with a trunk full of books he'd already read twice, an owl named Hedwig who had an opinion about everything, and a head full of information that sat in his mind like loaded ammunition. He'd spent the last month reading. Not just the school textbooks, though he'd read those too, cover to cover, because knowing things seemed like a better strategy than not knowing things, but the governance books, the history books, and the documents Gringotts had sent him by secure Goblin courier, copies of the Founders' original charter, annotated by Goblin legal scholars, with 9 centuries of precedent analysis. The Hogwarts Express was scarlet and magnificent, belching steam across the platform. Harry found a compartment, stowed his trunk, and settled in to watch the countryside unreel past the window while his mind worked. He thought about what he'd learned. The anti-werewolf legislation, the Werewolf Registration Act, the Werewolf Code of Conduct, the various amendments that restricted where werewolves could live, work, and exist, had been passed without a single werewolf being consulted or represented in the Wizengamot. The Muggleborn Integration Protocols, which sounded benign, included a clause, buried in subsection 14, paragraph 7, that authorized the Accidental Magic Reversal Squad to obliviate the families of Muggleborn children who declined their Hogwarts acceptance. Not just the children. The families. The parents had their memories of their magical child erased if they said no. Sirius Black, Harry's godfather, he discovered, a fact that made his blood pressure spike every time he thought about it, had been imprisoned in Azkaban for 11 years without a trial. Not a delayed trial. Not a closed trial. No trial. The emergency powers legislation that permitted this had been passed during the war against Voldemort and had never been repealed. Rubeus Hagrid had been expelled at age 13 based on the accusation of a schoolboy. His wand had been snapped. No investigation had been conducted. No appeal had been permitted. 50 years later, the man lived in a hut on the grounds of the school that had thrown him away and was still legally prohibited from performing magic. And these weren't exceptions. These weren't aberrations in an otherwise just system. These were the system. Layer upon layer of legislation, accumulated over centuries, built on the assumption that power was its own justification and that the people in charge were in charge because they deserved to be. Harry knew that assumption. He'd grown up inside it. The Dursleys operated on the same principle: we are the adults, you are the child, our authority is inherent and unchallengeable, and if the system hurts you, that's because you deserve to be hurt. He had never believed it. Not once. Not on his worst day in the cupboard under the stairs. "Excuse me," said a voice, and Harry looked up to find a round-faced boy standing in the compartment doorway, looking like he might cry. "Have you seen a toad?" "I've lost my toad." "No, sorry." "What does he look like?" He's a toad. Green. His name's Trevor. I'll keep an eye out." "I'm Harry." "Neville." "Neville Longbottom." The boy hesitated. Are you Harry Potter?" "Guilty." Neville's eyes went to the scar, then quickly away. He had good manners, Harry decided. Better than most of the adults Harry had met in the magical world, who stared at the scar like it was a tourist attraction. "My gran talks about you," Neville said, then flushed. "Sorry." Everyone probably says that." "It's fine. Want to sit down? You look like you could use a breather." Neville sat. He was nervous, the fidgeting, eye contact avoiding kind of nervous that Harry recognized from years of being the smallest person in every room. They talked about inconsequential things: Neville's toad, Hogwarts houses, whether the food on the train was any good. Harry learned that Neville's parents were in St. Mungo's, a long-term ward. They were hurt, during the war, and that Neville lived with his grandmother, who seemed to love him in the aggressive, suffocating way that people loved things they were terrified of losing. Harry liked him. He liked the way Neville apologized too much and laughed too little, because it suggested a person who had been made to feel small and was waiting for permission to be otherwise. A girl with bushy brown hair and an air of determined competence appeared in the doorway. "Has anyone seen a toad?" "A boy named Neville's lost one." "That's me," Neville said miserably. "Still lost." "I'm Hermione Granger," the girl said, turning to Harry. "And you are?" "Harry Potter." "Are you really?" "I've read about you in modern magical history and the rise and fall of the dark arts and great wizarding events of the 20th century. I hope they got the good side of my scar." Hermione's mouth twitched. It was a near smile, quickly suppressed. "Do you know what house you'll be in?" "I've been reading about all of them, and Gryffindor sounds best. Dumbledore was in Gryffindor, you know, but Ravenclaw wouldn't be bad either." "What about Slytherin?" She faltered. "Well, I mean, you know who was in Slytherin, wasn't he? And the books say a lot of things." Harry kept his tone light. "I'm trying not to make up my mind before I get there." Hermione studied him with the intensity of someone who wasn't used to being the second most interesting person in a room. Then she nodded. "That's actually quite sensible. Well, I should keep looking for the toad. Nice to meet you both." She left. Neville watched her go with the slightly dazed expression of someone who just survived a weather event. Hogwarts was everything and nothing like what Harry had expected. It was beautiful, genuinely, achingly beautiful, rising from the lakeshore like something out of a dream, its towers and turrets caught between the last light of sunset and the first cold glitter of stars. The enchanted ceiling in the great hall was a masterstroke of magic that made Harry's breath catch. The ghosts, the moving staircases, the suits of armor that shifted when you weren't looking, all of it was extraordinary. But Harry watched with different eyes than the other first years. He looked at the high table and saw a faculty that included exactly 0 Muggleborns and 1 half-giant who wasn't allowed to do magic. He looked at the house tables and saw a sorting system that separated 11-year-olds into factions and then encouraged those factions to compete against each other for the rest of their formative years. He looked at the staff and saw a potions master who radiated contempt, a history teacher who was literally dead, and a defense against the dark arts professor who stuttered so badly he could barely say his own name and who wore a turban that smelled faintly of garlic and something else. Something that made the back of Harry's scar prickle with a discomfort he couldn't name. The sorting hat was placed on his head, and a voice filled his mind. Well, well, well. What have we here? Harry sat very still on the stool. Courage, yes, quite a lot of that. Intelligence, certainly. Loyalty, buried deep, but burning hot. And ambition, oh my. Not for yourself, though. For the world. You want to change it. Harry didn't respond. He didn't need to. The hat was already in his head. You know about the Regency, the hat said, and it sounded surprised. You know what you hold. And you're already planning what to do with it. Extraordinary. The last person who sat under me with plans this large was, don't say Voldemort. I was going to say Dumbledore, actually. Though the comparison to Riddle isn't entirely unfounded. He had ambition too. The difference is in the direction. Where do I go? The hat was quiet for a moment. Harry could feel it rifling through his thoughts, his memories, his intentions, like a librarian scanning a card catalogue. You could do great things in any house. But the Regency is Slytherin's. The magic is Slytherin's. And what you're planning will require you to understand Slytherin from the inside, its people, its politics, its power structures. You can't reform what you don't comprehend. Slytherin, then. You're certain. The easy road is Gryffindor. Everyone expects it. No one will question it. I'm not interested in easy. I'm interested in effective. The hat laughed. It was a strange sensation, having a hat laugh inside your skull. Slytherin, the hat bellowed, and the great hall went utterly, completely silent. Harry took off the hat, set it on the stool, and walked toward the Slytherin table. The silence held for 1 heartbeat, 2, 3, then the Slytherin table erupted in shocked, delighted applause, and the rest of the hall dissolved into chaos. At the high table, Dumbledore's eyes followed Harry all the way to his seat. They were not twinkling. The Slytherin common room was underwater. Not literally, the windows looked out into the lake, casting everything in rippling green light, and occasionally something large and tentacled would drift past the glass like a submarine nature documentary. Harry found it oddly calming. He'd spent 10 years in a cupboard under the stairs. An underground room with a view was a significant upgrade. His housemates were watching him with the careful intensity of cats who just noticed a new cat in their territory. Draco Malfoy had positioned himself at the center of a cluster of purebloods, Crabbe, Goyle, Zabini, Nott, and was holding court with the confidence of a boy who had been told since birth that this was his kingdom. Harry was aware of being studied, measured, and evaluated. He let them look. He sat in an armchair near the fire, opened Hogwarts, a history, and waited. The first person to approach him was not who he expected. You're not what I anticipated. The girl was his age, with dark hair, pale features, and blue eyes that assessed him with the clinical detachment of a chess player studying the board. She sat in the armchair across from him without asking permission, which Harry respected. People who asked permission were people who accepted that permission could be denied. Daphne Greengrass, she said. Harry Potter. Yes, that much was established by the screaming. I meant you're not what the story suggested. The boy who lived, icon of the light, Dumbledore's golden child, and you come to Slytherin. That's either very brave or very calculated. Can it be both? The corner of her mouth moved. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was adjacent to one. In Slytherin, it had better be. The brave and the stupid look exactly the same until the results come in. Good thing I plan on getting results. She looked at the book in his hands, not the title, but the specific page he'd been reading, which was the chapter on the Hogwarts Charter and the Founder's governing authority. Her eyes sharpened. That's an interesting chapter. It's an interesting school. Daphne Greengrass leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. She was 11 years old, and she already had the posture of someone who'd been trained in the art of revealing nothing. Potter, let me be direct, since we're going to be sharing a common room for 7 years. My family is neutral. We don't align with Malfoy's faction, we don't align with Dumbledore's, and we don't align with any of the other power blocks that treat this school like a recruitment ground. We survive by being smarter than everyone else and less visible than anyone would like. That sounds exhausting. It is. So why are you talking to me? Because you're the most interesting thing that's happened in this house in a generation, and ignoring you would be the stupidest possible move. She paused. Also, you're reading about the Founder's Charter, and I want to know why. Harry closed the book. He looked at Daphne Greengrass, and he made a decision, the first of many he would make in the coming weeks, each one a step closer to the edge of a cliff he fully intended to jump off. Can you keep a secret? I'm a Slytherin. Keeping secrets is the only thing we're good at. You're also good at telling them. That's why I'm asking. Another almost smile. Fair point. Yes, Potter, I can keep a secret. Harry leaned forward. What do you know about the Slytherin Regency? Daphne knew enough to go pale. Not visibly, she controlled her reactions with a discipline that Harry found impressive in someone his age, but the color drained from behind her eyes, leaving them bright and hard. That's not possible, she said. The goblins disagree. The goblins, you've already, she stopped. Took a breath. Started again. You're telling me that Gringotts has verified your claim to the Slytherin Regency. Right of conquest. Voldemort was the last blood heir. I defeated him. The claim transferred. Daphne stared at him for a long moment. Then she stood up, walked to her dormitory door, cast 3 privacy charms that she should not have known at age 11, and sat back down. Tell me everything. Harry told her. Not all of it, not the emotional parts, not the parts about the Dursleys or the cupboard or the bone-deep anger that had crystallized in his chest when he'd read about Sirius Black, but the facts. The inheritance test. Ragnarok's explanation. The legal framework. The dormant regencies. The fact that the entire Ministry of Magic was, technically, an unauthorized squatter on the Founder's authority. Daphne listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. You're going to use it, she said. Yes. To do what? To fix things. Fix, she let out a sound that was half laugh, half disbelief. Potter, you can't fix the Ministry of Magic. It's not a broken broomstick. It's 900 years of accumulated power, corruption, and self-interest, defended by people who would literally kill to maintain their positions. I'm not going to fix the Ministry. I'm going to make it justify itself. She went still. What do you mean? Every law the Ministry has ever passed is unratified. If I claim the Regency and exercise the veto, every piece of legislation loses its magical enforcement. The whole system resets to 0. That's insane. Is it? The anti-werewolf laws. The Muggleborn Obliviation Protocols. The emergency powers that let them throw people in Azkaban without trial. All of it sits on a legal foundation that was never legitimate in the first place. I'm not breaking anything. I'm pointing out that it was never built right. And then what? You veto everything and the magical world falls apart. It won't fall apart. People don't stop being people because the laws change. The Aurors will still show up to emergencies. The hospitals will still heal the sick. The schools will still teach. Society doesn't run on legislation, it runs on people. And the laws that actually matter. Murder statutes. Property rights. Contract enforcement. I re-ratify them. One by one. Every law that deserves to exist gets put back. Every law that doesn't, stays dead. Harry met her eyes. I'm not an anarchist, Daphne. I'm a filter. She stared at him. Then she said, very quietly, you're 11. So is everyone who gets sorted into this house. That doesn't stop Malfoy from playing politics or Snape from bullying children. Nobody in this world seems to care about age when it's convenient for them. I'm just returning the favor. Daphne Greengrass sat in her chair in the greenlit common room of Slytherin House, and she looked at Harry Potter, and something shifted behind her eyes, a door opening, or maybe a wall coming down. You'll need allies, she said. I know. You'll need someone who understands the Wizengamot, the family alliances, the fault lines in the power structure. I know. You'll need someone who can tell you when you're being an idiot. Are you volunteering? Against my better judgment. She extended her hand. Partners, then. But I reserve the right to say I told you so. Harry shook her hand. Her grip was firm, her palm was cold, and her eyes were already calculating. Deal, he said. The first 3 weeks at Hogwarts were research, observation, and controlled fury. Harry attended classes. He excelled at them, not ostentatiously, not with Hermione Granger's hand-waving enthusiasm, but with a quiet competence that his professors noticed and couldn't quite categorize. He was good at magic. Better than good, the spells came to him with an ease that suggested either unusual talent or unusual preparation, and since he'd only known about magic for 2 months, talent seemed the likely explanation. Snape hated him. This was apparent from the first potions class, when the potions master had fired questions at Harry like hexes and then taken points for arrogance, when Harry answered them correctly. Harry bore it without visible reaction, which seemed to infuriate Snape more than defiance would have. He filed Snape away under problems to solve later, and moved on. Draco Malfoy wanted to be his friend, or rather wanted to own his friendship the way one might own a particularly impressive racing broom. Harry was polite, pleasant, and gave Draco absolutely nothing to work with. Draco, who had been raised to read social dynamics like a hawk reads thermals, found this deeply unsettling. And every evening, while his housemates socialized and schemed and did homework, Harry went to the library. He read everything. The restricted section was off limits, but the regular stacks contained more than enough: histories of the Wizengamot, records of legislation, transcripts of debates. He read the werewolf laws, all 12 of them, each one worse than the last, each one passed without a single dissenting vote. He read the Muggleborn regulations and found the Obliviation Clause exactly where the Gringotts documents had said it would be. He read the Emergency Powers Act that had allowed Bartemius Crouch Sr. to send people to Azkaban without trial, and he read the amendment that was supposed to repeal it after the war, and he read the fine print that explained why it had never actually been repealed. Daphne helped. She knew the political landscape the way a native knows their homeland, instinctively, in the bones. She could name every family on the Wizengamot, their alliances, their feuds, their pressure points. She explained the Sacred 28, the registry of truly pure-blood families that functioned as a social register and a blacklist simultaneously. She explained how money flowed through the ministry, who owed whom, and where the bodies were buried, sometimes literally. Malfoy's father is the key power broker, she said one evening, sitting across from Harry at a corner table in the library. He doesn't hold a ministry position, he doesn't need to. He donates to the right campaigns, whispers in the right ears, and makes sure the right people owe him favors. Half the Wizengamot votes the way Lucius Malfoy wants because he's bought them, and the other half votes his way because they're afraid of what happens if they don't. And Dumbledore? Daphne's expression was complicated. Dumbledore is different. He doesn't operate through money or threats. He operates through moral authority. People follow him because they believe he's good, and to be fair, he mostly is. But he's also the chief warlock of the Wizengamot, the supreme mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards, and the headmaster of Hogwarts. That's 3 of the most powerful positions in the magical world held by one man, and nobody seems to think that's a problem. Because they trust him. Because they trust him, Daphne agreed. Which means his power has no check except his own conscience. And I'm sure his conscience is very impressive, but I notice he hasn't used any of those positions to repeal the werewolf laws or free Sirius Black or fix any of the things you're angry about. Harry looked at her. You've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about this since I was 8. I just never had anyone to think about it with. There was something in her voice, not vulnerability exactly, but the shadow of it. Harry recognized it. He'd worn that shadow himself, in the cupboard, in the dark, thinking thoughts that no one would ever hear because there was no one to hear them. Well, he said. You do now. The moment came on a Saturday in October. Harry had been waiting for the right catalyst, the thing that would transform his cold anger from a theoretical position into an imperative for action. He'd assumed it would be something dramatic. A revelation. A confrontation. A line crossed. Instead, it was a first-year Hufflepuff named Justin Finch Fletchley, sitting alone in the library with tears streaming silently down his face. Harry was passing through on his way to the restricted section. He'd finally gotten Flitwick to sign a permission slip by demonstrating fourth-year charms, when he noticed Justin at a table near the windows, hunched over a letter. You all right? Justin looked up. His eyes were red. My parents wrote back. They want me to come home. Is that bad? It's bad because they want me to come home permanently. They're pulling me out. They say magic is, he swallowed. They say they've thought about it and they don't want me involved in this world. And a man from the ministry came to talk to them, and he said if I withdraw from Hogwarts, they'll have to. He couldn't finish. He didn't have to. Harry already knew. The Obliviation Protocol, Harry said quietly. Justin stared at him. You know about it? I know about it. They'll erase my parents' memories. They'll make them forget I'm a wizard. They'll make them forget all of it, the letter, the shopping in Diagon Alley, everything. His voice cracked. They said it's for security reasons. They said it's to protect the statute of secrecy. But it's my family. How can they just take my parents' memories away? Harry sat down across from him. They can't. They can. It's the law. No, Harry said. I mean they can't. I won't let them. Justin looked at him with the desperate, disbelieving hope of someone drowning who's just been thrown a rope. How? How can you possibly? Give me a week, Harry said. And don't send a reply to your parents yet. Tell them you're working on it. Tell them, he paused. Tell them that someone at school is going to fix it. Harry left the library. He walked down the corridor, took the stairs 2 at a time, and found Daphne in the common room playing chess against Blaise Zabini. We need to talk, he said. Daphne looked at his face. Then she looked at Zabini. I resign. You were winning, Zabini protested. Priorities. She stood and followed Harry to a quiet alcove off the main room. What happened? Harry told her about Justin. About the letter. About an 11-year-old boy crying alone in a library because the government was going to erase his parents' minds. Daphne listened. When he finished, she said, that's terrible, but it's been happening for decades. Why now? Because I can see his face, Harry said. Because it's not a line in a law book anymore, it's a kid who's going to lose his family because the ministry decided their memory is less important than their precious statute. Because if I know about this and I have the power to stop it and I don't, then I'm no better than the people who wrote the law in the first place. Daphne was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded once. Then we move. How do we get you in front of the Wizengamot? Ragnarok arranged it. The goblins have formal petition rights under the original charter. They can request an audience with the Wizengamot on behalf of any regent. I just have to send word. How long has this been set up? Since the day I left Gringotts. Daphne stared at him. You've been planning this since July. I've been preparing since July. There's a difference. He paused. I wasn't going to act until I understood what I was doing. I understand now. Potter, she stopped. Took a breath. Harry. Once you do this, there's no going back. Every powerful person in Britain will either want to use you or destroy you. Probably both. I know. You're 11 years old. Everyone keeps saying that like it's an argument. It's not an argument. It's a fact. And facts are what we deal in. She straightened her shoulders. So. When? Wednesday. There's a scheduled Wizengamot session. That gives us 4 days to prepare. 3, actually. I want to visit Gringotts on Tuesday to finalize the documentation. Daphne looked at him for a long time. Then, for the first time since he'd met her, she smiled. Not an almost smile, not a controlled twitch of the lips, a real smile, bright and sharp and slightly wild. You know, she said, when I came to Hogwarts, I thought the most exciting thing that would happen this year was learning transfiguration. Sorry to disappoint. Oh, I'm not disappointed. Her smile widened. I'm terrified. There's a difference. Wednesday arrived. Harry had sent word to Gringotts. Ragnarok had filed the petition. The Wizengamot had granted the audience, mostly because refusing a Gringotts petition would have caused a diplomatic incident with the Goblin Nation, and no one wanted that. Harry left Hogwarts through a fireplace in Dumbledore's office, the only floor-connected hearth in the castle, after informing a deeply confused Professor McGonagall that he had official business at the Ministry. She had tried to stop him. He had shown her the Gringotts petition, which was stamped with both Goblin seals and the Hogwarts Charter seal. Ragnarok had been very thorough, and she had reluctantly let him go. Dumbledore wasn't in his office at the time. Harry suspected this was not a coincidence. The headmaster was, by all accounts, already at the Ministry for the Wizengamot session. The Ministry of Magic was underground, which Harry found fitting. Its atrium was enormous, a vaulted space with a polished floor, a terrible fountain depicting a witch and wizard standing heroically above a goblin, house elf, and centaur gazing adoringly upward, and a general atmosphere of self-congratulatory grandeur that reminded Harry of the Dursleys' living room on a massive scale. Ragnarok met him at the entrance. The goblin was dressed in formal armor, actual armor, ceremonial but real, with the Gringotts crest on the breastplate. 2 goblin guards flanked him, carrying axes that were not ceremonial at all. Mr. Potter. Director Ragnarok. The Wizengamot is in session. They expect a petition regarding goblin trade rights, that is the official pretext. The chamber is full. The chief warlock is presiding. He paused. Are you ready? Harry thought about Justin Finch-Fletchley crying in the library. He thought about Hagrid's snapped wand. He thought about Sirius Black rotting in Azkaban without a trial. He thought about every werewolf who couldn't get a job, every Muggleborn family who'd been obliviated, every person who had been ground down by a system that existed to serve the people at the top and grind the people at the bottom. Yes, he said. They walked through the Ministry together, a goblin director in battle armor and an 11-year-old boy in Hogwarts robes, and the Ministry employees who saw them pass went silent and stared. The Wizengamot chamber was circular, with tiered seating rising in concentric rings around a central floor. The members sat in plum-colored robes, arranged by faction in a way that Daphne had mapped out for Harry on a piece of parchment he'd memorized and burned. Chief Warlock Dumbledore sat at the highest point, in a carved chair that gave him a view of the entire room. Minister Fudge sat to his right. Amelia Bones, head of the DMLE, sat to his left. The room was full. Perhaps 200 witches and wizards, plus staff, plus spectators in the gallery. The air hummed with the low murmur of conversation and the ambient magic of some of the most powerful people in the country gathered in one place. The Goblin Herald at the door struck the floor with a staff. Presenting a petition from the Goblin Nation of Gringotts, filed under Article 7 of the Hogwarts Charter, on behalf of a claimant to a founder's regency. The murmur died. 200 heads turned. Dumbledore leaned forward in his chair. Harry walked onto the floor of the Wizengamot chamber. He was small. He was young. His robes were school issue, not tailored. His hair was a mess. His glasses were slightly crooked. And every person in that room felt it, a pressure, a weight, a sense of something large moving behind the thin figure of the boy on the floor. It was the Regency's magic, stirring in recognition of its claimant, and it felt like standing at the base of a mountain that had just begun to move. "Mr. Potter," Dumbledore said, and his voice was calm, measured, and absolutely alert. "This is unexpected." "Chief Warlock," Harry said. His voice was steady. Daphne had made him practice projecting in the common room at 2 in the morning, casting a quiet sonorous charm on herself and coaching him until his voice carried without strain. "Members of the Wizengamot. Minister. I appreciate you receiving this petition. The petition references a founder's regency," said Amelia Bones, who had a face like granite and eyes that missed nothing. "Would you care to elaborate?" "I would." Harry reached into his robes and produced a rolled parchment sealed with the Gringotts crest. "This is the result of a formal inheritance audit conducted by Gringotts Bank, verifying my identity and any claims attached to my bloodline. Director Ragnarok can attest to its authenticity." Ragnarok stepped forward. "The Goblin Nation confirms the validity of this document. Our verification methods predate the Ministry and are recognized under the original Hogwarts Charter, which this body claims as its foundational authority." "Noted," said Dumbledore. His eyes were fixed on Harry with an intensity that would have been intimidating if Harry hadn't spent 10 years being stared at by Vernon Dursley, who was far less intelligent and far more frightening. "Mr. Potter, please state your claim." Harry took a breath. Not a deep one, not a dramatic, visible breath that would telegraph nervousness, just enough to settle himself. The wizard known as Lord Voldemort, the chamber erupted. Gasps, flinches, cries of protest, the name hit the room like a physical blow. Fudge went purple. Several members of the Wizengamot actually ducked. Dumbledore raised a hand, and the room quieted, but it took longer than it should have. Harry waited. When the silence returned, he continued. "Was born Tom Marvolo Riddle, son of Mary P. Gaunt, last known descendant of Salazar Slytherin. The Gaunt lineage is documented in the Gringotts genealogical records and confirmed by goblin blood verification. As the blood heir of Slytherin, Riddle held a dormant claim to the Slytherin Regency, one of the 4 governing authorities established by the founders of Hogwarts." He could feel the room shifting. Confusion, mostly. Some fear. A few faces, Lucius Malfoy among them, sitting in the upper tiers with an expression of polished neutrality, showed the sharp focus of people who understood exactly where this was going. On October 31, 1981, Tom Riddle, operating as Lord Voldemort, attacked my family. He murdered my parents. He turned his wand on me. His curse rebounded, and he was destroyed. Harry paused. Let the words settle. Under magical law, specifically, under the law of conquest as established in the Founders' Charter and recognized by the Goblin Nation, the defeat of a titleholder transfers all hereditary claims to the victor. Tom Riddle's claim to the Slytherin Regency transferred to me upon his defeat. Dead silence. "I am here," Harry said, "to formally invoke that claim." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. "This is preposterous," Fudge sputtered, finding his voice. "The Regencies are, they're historical curiosities. They haven't been exercised in 914 years, Harry supplied. But they were never dissolved. The Founders' Charter is a magically binding document. It cannot be superseded by legislation. It can only be amended by the regents themselves, and since there have been no active regents, it has never been amended. The charter still stands. And under its terms, the regencies still hold full governing authority over magical Britain. "This is a child," someone said from the upper tiers. "A first-year student." "You can't seriously, madam, the charter specifies no age requirement for regents. If you'd like to challenge that, you're welcome to take it up with the founders. I understand at least one of them is available as a ghost." A ripple of something, not quite laughter, but adjacent to it, moved through the chamber. Harry didn't smile. He could feel the Regency's magic building in his chest like a tide, pressing outward, wanting to be released. Dumbledore spoke. "Mr. Potter, even if we accept the validity of your claim, and I note that this is a significant if, what exactly do you intend to do with this authority?" Harry looked up at him. The old man's blue eyes were piercing, searching, trying to see past the words to the intent beneath. Harry let him look. He had nothing to hide. The Founders' Charter requires regent ratification of all laws governing magical Britain. For 900 years, no law has been ratified. Every piece of legislation this body has ever passed, every statute, every decree, every regulation, is, by the terms of the Charter, unenforceable. Pandemonium. Absolute pandemonium. People were shouting, standing, pointing wands. Fudge looked like he was having a cardiac event. Amelia Bones had gone very still and very pale. Lucius Malfoy's mask of neutrality had cracked, showing something cold and calculating beneath. Dumbledore's wand erupted with a crack like thunder, and the room fell silent. "Continue, Mr. Potter," he said, and his voice was quiet but absolute. "I am invoking the Slytherin Regency," Harry said. "And in my capacity as regent, I am exercising my right of legislative review." He paused. 1 heartbeat. 2. "I hereby veto every law the Ministry of Magic has ever passed." The magic answered. It started in the floor, a vibration, deep and bone-shaking, that climbed the walls and made the tiered seats tremble. The enchanted lights flickered. The air pressure changed. Ancient runes carved into the foundation stones of the chamber, runes that no living person had ever seen activate, blazed to life, burning gold and green, spiraling up the walls like ivy made of fire. Harry felt it in his blood. The Regency, dormant for 9 centuries, waking up. Acknowledging its master. Reaching out through the ley lines and ward stones and anchor points that connected every magical institution in Britain, and pulling. Every enforcement enchantment attached to every law the ministry had ever passed felt the pull, and one by one, they began to dissolve. Across the country, though Harry wouldn't learn the full extent until later, magical contracts flickered. Ministry seals lost their glow. The enchantments on Azkaban shuddered. Warning wards at the borders of magical communities stuttered and went dark. Registry spells that tracked werewolves failed. Monitoring charms on Muggleborn households went silent. The entire apparatus of magical law enforcement shivered, spasmed, and went still. In the Wizing chamber, the runes blazed for 10 seconds, 20, 30, and then faded, leaving afterimages burned into the air like the memory of lightning. The chamber was silent. 200 of the most powerful witches and wizards in Britain sat in their plum-colored robes and stared at an 11-year-old boy standing alone on the floor, and not one of them spoke. Harry stood in the silence and felt the weight of what he had done settle onto his shoulders. It was heavy. It was supposed to be heavy. He would carry it anyway. The slate is clean, he said. Every law this body has passed is now void. Not permanently, I am not an anarchist, and I am not interested in chaos. But before any law is restored, it will be reviewed. It will be debated. It will be justified. And if it deserves to exist, I will ratify it. He looked up at the tears, at the shocked faces, the furious faces, the terrified faces. At Lucius Malfoy, whose expression had settled into something that looked almost like respect, though the kind of respect a general has for a weapon pointed at his chest. At Amelia Bones, who was staring at him with wide eyes and a mind visibly racing behind them. At Dumbledore, whose face was unreadable, absolutely, completely unreadable, in a way that was more frightening than any expression could have been. If a law is just, it will survive my review, Harry said. If a law is not, if it persecutes the innocent, denies basic rights, or exists only to protect the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable, then it dies. Today. He took one more breath. My name is Harry Potter. I am the Slytherin Regent. And this body answers to me until such time as the other 3 regencies are claimed and a proper system of governance is established. He turned and walked out of the chamber. Behind him, the Wizengamot exploded. Ragnarok walked beside him through the ministry atrium, and the goblin was smiling, that terrible, iron-toothed smile that promised nothing comfortable. Well done, Mr. Potter. Is it? Harry's hands were shaking. He jammed them into his pockets. I just dissolved the legal framework of an entire country. Yes. Isn't it wonderful? It's terrifying. Those are not mutually exclusive. Ragnarok glanced at him. You did well. The magic accepted you. The Regency is active. And the enforcement enchantments are dissolving as we speak, every statute, every regulation, every decree. By morning, the ministry will have authority over precisely nothing. The people will still follow habits. Routines. The Aurors won't stop showing up to work just because their mandate evaporated. No. But they'll know that their mandate has evaporated. And that changes everything. They reached the flue. Harry stopped. Director Ragnarok. Mr. Potter. Thank you. For everything. Ragnarok inclined his head. The Goblin Nation has waited a very long time for this, Mr. Potter. Longer than you know. We are invested in the outcome. He paused. Go back to school. Rest. Tomorrow, the real work begins. Harry stepped into the green flames and said, Hogwarts, headmaster's office. The office was empty when he arrived. Dumbledore was still at the ministry, presumably trying to prevent a riot, but the portraits on the walls were wide awake and buzzing with conversation. Every former headmaster and headmistress was watching him with expressions ranging from shock to fury to, in the case of one portrait of a sly-looking man in green robes, undisguised delight. Young man, said the portrait of Phineas Nigellus Black, the least popular headmaster in Hogwarts history, that was either the most brilliant thing a student has ever done or the most catastrophically stupid. I look forward to finding out which. Harry didn't respond. He left the office, descended the spiral staircase, and walked through the corridors of Hogwarts toward the dungeons. The castle was quiet, most students were in their last classes of the day, and his footsteps echoed in the empty hallways. Halfway to the common room, he passed a window that looked out over the Black Lake. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of gold and amber, and the castle's reflection shimmered on the surface like a dream of itself. Harry stopped. He leaned against the stone wall and pressed his forehead to the cool glass and closed his eyes. He thought about Justin Finch-Fletchley. He thought about Hagrid. He thought about Sirius Black, locked in a cell in the middle of the ocean, screaming into the dark with no one to hear. He thought about every person who had ever been crushed by a system that was supposed to protect them, and he thought about the fact that he had just torn that system down to its foundations, and he thought about the fact that he was 11 years old and he had homework due tomorrow and he didn't know if what he'd done was brave or insane or both. The glass was cold against his forehead. The sunset was beautiful. The world was changing. He opened his eyes. Daphne was standing at the end of the corridor, watching him. She'd come looking, he could tell by the slightly out-of-breath quality of her poise, the one crack in her composure that told him she'd been running. "Well," she said. "I did it." She walked toward him. Her footsteps were steady, measured, even on the ancient stones. "How bad was it?" "I think Fudge may have had an actual stroke." "That's not bad. That's a public service." She stopped in front of him. Close enough that he could see the small, barely there freckles across the bridge of her nose that she hid with a glamour charm. Close enough that her eyes, in the sunset light, were the color of a winter sky. "How are you?" "Terrified," he said. "Good. That means you're not stupid." She reached out and straightened his tie, a gesture so unexpected, so casually intimate, that Harry's brain momentarily stopped working. "Come on, Potter. We've got a country to rebuild." She turned and walked toward the common room. Harry watched her go for a moment, the set of her shoulders, the slight sway of her dark hair, the absolute certainty in her stride, and then he followed. The sun went down behind Hogwarts. The wards hummed. Somewhere deep in the castle's foundations, something ancient stirred, and the stones themselves seemed to breathe. The world was watching. Harry Potter had just torn it all down. Now came the hard part. Now he had to build it back up. Chapter 2, Ashes of Order. Harry woke to chaos. Not the immediate kind, no one was shaking him or pointing a wand at his face. The Slytherin dormitory was quiet, the green-tinged light filtering through the lake windows as gentle and eerie as ever. But he could hear it through the walls, through the stone, through the ancient bones of the castle itself, a vibration. Not physical. Magical. Hogwarts was unsettled, like a dog sensing a storm that hadn't arrived yet. He dressed quickly, wand in his pocket, and found Daphne already in the common room. She was sitting in her usual armchair with the Daily Prophet spread across her lap, and she wasn't alone. Blaise Zabini sat across from her, legs crossed, expression arranged in the careful neutrality of someone who has realized the world shifted while he slept and is trying very hard to figure out which way was up. "Morning," Harry said. Daphne held up the paper. The headline was 2 inches tall, "Boy Who Lived Destroys Ministry, Slytherin Regency Invoked, All Laws Void." Below it, a photograph of Harry walking out of the Wizengamot chamber, taken from behind, small figure, enormous doors, 2 goblin guards flanking him. It was, Harry had to admit, a dramatic image. Someone at the Prophet had a good eye for composition. "Page 3 has a lovely editorial calling you the next Dark Lord," Daphne said. "Page 5 has a counter-editorial calling you the savior of the wizarding world. Page 7 has a think piece asking whether the age of consent applies to legislative authority. Page 12 has a recipe for shepherd's pie. I assume that last one was already typeset. What's Zabini doing here?" Blaise uncrossed his legs and recrossed them in the other direction. "Hedging my bets. Honestly refreshing. Isn't it? I find that honesty in the pursuit of self-interest is much more efficient than pretending to have principles." He paused. "No offense. None taken. What do you want?" "To understand what's happening, who's going to win, and which side of the line I should be standing on when the dust settles. I'm Italian on my mother's side. We have a cultural appreciation for regime change." Harry looked at Daphne. She gave a micro-shrug that said he's useful and he knows it. "Pull up a chair," Harry said. "But understand something, I'm not building a faction. I'm not collecting followers. If you want to help because you think what I'm doing is right, welcome. If you're here to position yourself for advantage, you can do that from further away." Blaise studied him. Then he smiled, a real one, not the performative smirk he usually wore. "You know, Potter, the truly dangerous politicians are the ones who actually believe in what they're doing. The cynics are predictable. The true believers change the world. He stood. I'll be in the library. When you need someone who speaks fluent bureaucrat and has no emotional attachment to any particular outcome, you know where to find me. He left. The common room was otherwise empty. It was early, barely past 6, and most students wouldn't stir for another hour. He'll be useful, Daphne said. I know. That's what worries me. Worry later. Read now. She flipped the paper to page 2. The ministry held an emergency session last night. After you left. It went until 3 in the morning. Harry sat down and read. The emergency session had been, by all accounts, a disaster. Fudge had demanded Harry's immediate arrest. Amelia Bones had asked the question that stopped him cold, under what law, Minister? The Wisingamot had no legislation to enforce. The Aurors had no mandate. The minister's own authority derived from statutes that were now void. Fudge couldn't arrest Harry because the legal mechanism for arrest had ceased to exist. The session had devolved into shouting. Dumbledore had eventually restored order and proposed a 60-day emergency framework, basic criminal prohibitions, essential governance functions, bare-bones regulatory authority, that would operate on the Wisingamot's collective agreement until a more permanent solution could be found. The proposal had passed, barely, with Lucius Malfoy's faction abstaining. They're treating it like a crisis, Harry said. It is a crisis. No, I mean, they're treating it like something happened to them. Like a natural disaster. They haven't started thinking about what comes next because they're still trying to process what already happened. That won't last. Malfoy abstained on the emergency framework. You know what that means. He's planning something. He's planning everything. The emergency framework gives the ministry 60 days of operating authority. That's 60 days for Malfoy to either find a way to break the Regency, co-opt it, or build a new power structure that doesn't need it. Daphne set down the paper. We need to move faster than him. First things first. I need to send a list to the Wisingamot. A list of what? Laws I'm willing to ratify immediately. Murder, assault, theft, fraud, the obvious stuff. I want people to see that I'm not trying to create anarchy. I'm trying to create a filter. And the laws you're not ratifying? Harry's jaw tightened. Those, they're going to have to earn. Breakfast in the Great Hall was an experience. Harry walked in, and the room fell silent with the abruptness of a conductor cutting off an orchestra. 500 students turned to look at him. The teachers at the high table went rigid. Snape, who was mid-sip of his morning coffee, set his cup down with deliberate care and stared at Harry with an expression that could have stripped paint. Harry walked to the Slytherin table, sat down, and buttered a piece of toast. The silence held for about 4 seconds. Then the dam broke. Whispers became murmurs, became open conversation, became something approaching a roar. Students were pointing. Some were scared. Some were excited. A cluster of Hufflepuffs were openly crying, though Harry couldn't tell if it was from fear or relief. Potter. Draco Malfoy appeared at his shoulder, flanked by Crabbe and Goyle. The blond boy's face was a masterwork of barely controlled emotion, fury, confusion, something that might have been fear. My father will be speaking with you. I look forward to it. You don't understand. You've destroyed, you can't just. Draco's composure cracked for a moment, showing the frightened 11-year-old underneath the pureblood veneer. Do you have any idea what you've done? Yes, Harry said. I have a very precise idea. Would you like some toast? Draco stared at him, turned on his heel, and stalked away. Crabbe and Goyle lumbered after him like confused tugboats. Daphne sat down across from Harry. She'd entered the hall 3 minutes after him. By design, they'd agreed not to be seen arriving together until they were ready to be perceived as a unit. Slytherin politics required careful staging. McGonagall is coming this way, she murmured. Harry looked up. Indeed, Professor McGonagall was descending from the high table with the purposeful stride of a woman who had been awake since the early hours and was running entirely on Scottish determination and caffeine. "Mr. Potter. The headmaster would like to see you in his office after breakfast." "Of course, Professor. What time?" "Immediately after breakfast." "I'll be there." McGonagall looked at him. Her expression was complex, stern, yes, but also something else. Something that looked, against all probability, like grudging respect. "Mr. Potter, what you did yesterday, was necessary, Professor." "That remains to be seen." She paused. "But it was certainly brave. Reckless and potentially catastrophic, but brave." She turned and walked back to the high table, her tartan robe snapping behind her. "She likes you," Daphne said. "She thinks I'm insane." "Those aren't mutually exclusive in Gryffindor." Harry finished his toast, drank his pumpkin juice, and stood. On his way out of the hall, he passed the Hufflepuff table. Justin Finch-Fletchley was sitting with his housemates, and when he saw Harry, his face did something complicated and raw, gratitude and hope and terror all at once. Harry caught his eye. Gave him a single nod. Justin nodded back. The gargoyle guarding Dumbledore's office leaped aside before Harry could speak the password. Apparently, the headmaster had given instructions. Harry climbed the spiral staircase and knocked. "Enter." Dumbledore's office was exactly as Harry remembered from his brief Fleur transit, circular, cluttered with silver instruments that whirred and clicked, lined with portraits of former headmasters who were all very conspicuously pretending to be asleep. Fawkes the Phoenix sat on his perch, watching Harry with ancient golden eyes. The bird was beautiful, red and gold, burning with quiet fire, and Harry felt a strange kinship with it. Phoenixes died and were reborn. Harry was trying to do something similar, on a national scale. Dumbledore sat behind his desk. He looked tired, which was unusual. In every photograph and description Harry had encountered, the headmaster was portrayed as ageless, eternal, above such mortal concerns as fatigue. But the man in front of him had shadows under his eyes and lines around his mouth that spoke of a very long night. "Please sit, Harry." Harry sat. The chair in front of Dumbledore's desk was comfortable, much more comfortable than the goblin version, and positioned slightly lower than the headmaster's chair. A small thing. A positioning choice. Harry noticed it and filed it away. "Lemon drop?" "No, thank you." Dumbledore steepled his fingers. "I find myself in an unusual position, Harry. I have spent a great many years guiding young people through moments of crisis, and I like to think I've developed some skill at it. But I must confess, I have never had a student dissolve the legal framework of the nation before breakfast. It was before dinner, technically." The faintest suggestion of amusement crossed Dumbledore's face. "Quite so. Harry, I want you to know that I am not your enemy. What you did yesterday was extraordinary, I use the word in its literal sense, beyond the ordinary, and I believe your intentions are good. But good intentions are not the same as good outcomes. You have created a power vacuum, Harry. The ministry is paralyzed. The Auror Corps is operating on institutional inertia and personal commitment, not legal authority. Azkaban," he paused, and something moved behind his eyes. "Azkaban's enchantments are wavering. The Dementors are bound by contract, not by statute, so they remain. But the prisoners know that the laws that put them there have been voided. There have been disturbances." Harry felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Are the prisoners escaping?" "Not yet. But the situation is unstable." Dumbledore leaned forward. "Harry, I must ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Do you understand what you hold? The Regency is not merely a political tool, it is a magical one. It connects you to ley lines, ward stones, and anchor points that form the foundation of magical infrastructure across Britain. Activating it after 9 centuries of dormancy has consequences that go beyond legislation." "What kind of consequences?" The castle has been shifting. Corridors that have been sealed for centuries are opening. Wards that have stood since the founder's time are fluctuating. I noticed it last night, a tremor in the defensive enchantments that should not be possible. He fixed Harry with those piercing blue eyes. The Regency is not just a title, Harry. It is a key. And you have just turned it in a lock that has been rusted shut for a very long time. Harry absorbed this. He thought about the vibration he'd felt that morning, the sense of the castle being unsettled. Not afraid, exactly. More like, waking up. I didn't know about that, he admitted. Ragnarok explained the political implications. He didn't mention the magical infrastructure. Director Ragnarok is a goblin. The goblin's interest in the Regency is primarily political. They have chafed under ministry authority for centuries. I do not doubt that Ragnarok's assistance was genuine, but it was also self-interested. He told you what you needed to know to do what he wanted you to do. Are you saying I was manipulated? I am saying you were informed selectively. There is a difference, but the result is often similar. Dumbledore's voice was gentle, but the gentleness had edges. Harry, I am going to make you an offer, and I want you to consider it carefully. Let me help you. The Regency is yours by right, I will not contest that. But the responsibility that comes with it is enormous, and you are 11. Yes. Everyone keeps reminding me. I was going to say, new to this world. You have been a wizard for 2 months. You are brilliant, I say this without flattery, but brilliance without experience is a blade without a handle. Let me be your advisor. Let me guide this process. Together, we can rebuild the legal framework in a way that is just, sustainable, and controlled. Dumbledore paused. Something flickered in his expression, not anger, exactly, but the shadow of something more complicated. Guided, he said. There is a difference. Is there? Harry met the old man's gaze and held it. Professor, you've been chief warlock of the Wizing for, how many years? Several decades. In those decades, did you ever use your position to repeal the anti-werewolf legislation? Silence. Did you ever push to free Sirius Black, my godfather, who's been in Azkaban for 10 years without a trial? The silence deepened. Did you ever challenge the Muggleborn Obliviation Protocols? The Emergency Powers Act? The creature classification laws that treat goblins and centaurs as subhuman? Dumbledore's face was very still. The political realities are that you held 3 of the most powerful positions in the magical world and used none of them to fix the things that needed fixing. You're a good man, Professor. I believe that. But you're a good man who has spent decades maintaining a system that isn't good, because changing it was too hard or too risky or too politically inconvenient. The portraits on the walls had given up pretending to sleep. Every former headmaster was staring at Harry with varying degrees of shock. Phineas Nigellus Black was grinning like a shark. Dumbledore sat back in his chair. He was quiet for a long time. You remind me, he said finally, of someone I knew a very long time ago. Someone brilliant and passionate and absolutely certain that they knew how to fix the world. Did they? No. They nearly destroyed it. The old man's voice was soft, weighted with a grief so old it had fossilized. Be careful, Harry. The road you are on, it has been walked before, by people with the best of intentions, and it does not always lead where you think. Harry stood. Professor, I'm not refusing your help. But I'm not placing myself under your guidance, either. I'll listen to your advice. I'll consider your perspective. But the decisions are mine. That's not negotiable. Dumbledore studied him. Whatever he saw, it didn't comfort him, but it didn't surprise him either. Very well, Harry. I will say one more thing, and then you are free to go. He paused. Be careful of the Regency's magic. It is old, older than any spell taught in this school. An old magic has a weight that young shoulders may find difficult to bear. I'll manage. I hope so. Something passed through Dumbledore's eyes, genuine concern, or a very convincing facsimile of it. My door is always open. Harry nodded and left. On his way down the spiral staircase, he noticed something that hadn't been there before, a door in the wall. Small, arched, set into the stone as if it had always been there, but Harry was certain it hadn't been visible when he'd walked up. The wood was dark with age, and the handle was wrought iron shaped like a serpent. He reached for it. The door swung open on its own, revealing a narrow corridor that descended into darkness. A breeze came up from below, cool, damp, carrying the scent of old stone and deep water. Harry felt the Regency's magic stir in his chest, recognizing something. He closed the door. Not yet. He had other things to deal with first. But he noted its location. And he noticed that when he looked back from the bottom of the staircase, the door was gone. The Ollery was the highest point in Hogwarts, and Harry climbed to it after leaving Dumbledore's office because he needed air and altitude and a few minutes to think without someone watching him. Hedwig hooted reproachfully when he arrived. She'd been getting a lot of mail addressed to him, letters were piling up around her perch like snowdrifts, and she clearly felt this was beneath her dignity. Sorry, girl, Harry said, stroking her feathers. Things have been busy. He sorted through the letters quickly. Most were from strangers, some congratulatory, some threatening, some incoherent. He set those aside. 3 were significant. The first was from Gringotts, written in Ragnarok's precise hand. Mr. Potter, the enforcement enchantments on ministry legislation are dissolving as projected. Gringotts' operations are unaffected, as we operate under Goblin Treaty law, which predates the ministry and is not subject to your veto. We will continue to provide legal and financial support as agreed. A formal list of laws recommended for immediate ratification is enclosed. I trust your judgment, but I recommend prioritizing criminal statutes. Civilized societies function poorly without the understanding that murder is frowned upon. R. The second was from Amelia Bones, head of the DMLE. Mr. Potter, I need to speak with you urgently. The Auror Corps is maintaining order through personal commitment, but that cannot last indefinitely. My officers need a legal basis for their actions. Without ratified criminal law, we cannot arrest, detain, or prosecute. Suspects in active investigations are citing the veto as grounds for dismissal of charges. I have 17 open cases that may collapse if this is not resolved within the week. I am not your enemy. I may be the closest thing you have to an ally in the ministry. Please respond. Amelia Bones, DMLE. The third was from Lucius Malfoy. It was written on cream-colored parchment that probably cost more than Harry's entire wardrobe. Mr. Potter, I would very much like to discuss the current situation with you at your earliest convenience. I believe we may find more common ground than you expect. I will be visiting Hogwarts on Friday to attend a scheduled Board of Governors meeting. Perhaps we could speak afterward. Lucius Malfoy. Harry read all 3 letters twice. Then he pulled out parchment and ink and began writing. To Ragnarok, thank you. Ratification list received. I'll begin working through it today. Please prepare documentation on the Founder's anchors. Dumbledore mentioned magical infrastructure connected to the Regency. I need to understand what I'm dealing with. To Amelia Bones, Madam Bones, I understand the urgency. I am preparing a list of criminal statutes for immediate ratification. Murder, assault, theft, and related offenses will be restored by end of day. I have no interest in criminals walking free because of a legal technicality. Can you meet me at Hogwarts this Saturday? I'd prefer to discuss the broader framework in person rather than by owl. Harry Potter, Slytherin Regent. To Lucius Malfoy, Mr. Malfoy, I'd be happy to speak with you on Friday. I look forward to finding that common ground. Harry Potter. He sent the letters with 3 different owls, Hedwig for Bones, because he wanted to make a good impression, and 2 school owls for the others. Then he sat on the cold stone ledge of the Ollery and looked out over the grounds. The Black Lake was flat and grey under an overcast sky. The Forbidden Forest was a dark smear on the horizon. Somewhere out there, beyond the mountains and the moors, the magical world was waking up to a reality where none of the rules applied anymore. Harry thought about what Dumbledore had said. About old magic and young shoulders. About brilliant, passionate people who had tried to fix the world and nearly destroyed it. He thought about the door in the staircase wall, and the breeze from below, and the feeling of the Regency's magic recognizing something in the darkness. He thought about Lucius Malfoy's letter, polite, reasonable, and absolutely predatory. Then he went to class. The next 3 days were a crash course in governance, conducted between potions essays and charms practice. Harry commandeered an unused classroom on the second floor. Professor Flitwick helped him find it, with the barely concealed glee of someone who thought the whole situation was academically fascinating, and turned it into a working office. Daphne brought a blackboard. Blaise brought quills and parchment. Tracy Davis, a quiet Slytherin girl who turned out to have a near-photographic memory for legal text, brought copies of every statute she could find in the library. They worked. Harry went through Ragnarok's recommended ratification list and cross-referenced it with Daphne's knowledge of the Wisingamot's faction politics. The process was straightforward for the easy cases. Murder was illegal again by Wednesday evening. Assault, theft, arson, and fraud followed by Thursday morning. Property rights were restored. Contract enforcement was restored. Basic regulatory frameworks for potions, magical creatures, and public safety were restored. Each ratification required Harry to sign a formal document. Ragnarok had provided the templates, based on the Founder's original charter, and channel a small amount of the Regency's magic to activate the enforcement enchantments. It was like signing a contract with your blood as well as your ink. Harry could feel each law clicking into place, becoming real, gaining the magical weight that made it enforceable. The hard cases were harder. The Statute of Secrecy, Daphne said on Thursday afternoon, tapping the blackboard where she'd written the name in large letters. This is the big one. Explain. The International Statute of Wizarding Secrecy isn't a British law, it's an international treaty. But Britain's enforcement mechanisms are domestic legislation. The Obliviator squads, the monitoring charms on underage magic, the muggle-repelling wards, all of that is statutory. You've voided it. So the statute itself still exists as a treaty, but we have no way to enforce it. Correct. And the International Confederation of Wizards is going to be very unhappy about that very soon. Harry rubbed his temples. Can I ratify the enforcement mechanisms without ratifying the Obliviation protocols? Daphne considered this. The Obliviation protocols are separate legislation. You could restore the basic secrecy enforcement, monitoring charms, muggle-repelling wards, Obliviator response to genuine breaches, while keeping the Muggleborn family Obliviation clause dead. Do it. Draft the ratification for me. Daphne nodded and began writing. She was fast, her handwriting was precise and elegant, the kind that came from years of tutoring, and she could draft legal language with a fluency that made Harry suspect she'd been reading Wisingamot transcripts for fun since she was 8. What about the anti-werewolf legislation? Tracy asked from her corner, where she was buried in a stack of parchment. Dead, Harry said. All of it. Permanently. People will panic. Werewolves aren't exactly popular. People will adjust. Werewolves are people 29 days out of 30. The Wolfsbane potion exists. We can draft new legislation that addresses genuine public safety concerns without treating an entire population as subhuman. That's going to be a hard sell in the Wisingamot. Then we'll sell it hard. Blaise appeared in the doorway. He'd been monitoring the Prophet and the gossip networks. His mother, who had married and outlived 7 wealthy wizards, had social connections that spanned half of Europe. Update from the Ministry, he said. Fudge is calling for a formal challenge to the Regency's legitimacy. He wants to argue that the right of conquest doesn't apply because Voldemort's defeat was, and I'm quoting here, an accident of uncontrolled infant magic, not a deliberate act of conquest. That's creative, Daphne said, not looking up from her drafting. Will it work? Harry asked. Legally? No. The precedent is ironclad, magical conquest doesn't require intent, just result. Politically? It muddies the water. Gives people a reason to doubt your authority if they want one. Who's backing him? The usual suspects. The old guard conservatives who'd rather have a broken system they control than a functional one they don't. But the interesting part is who's not backing him. Malfoy is keeping his distance from the challenge. So is Dumbledore. Harry frowned. Malfoy's coming here tomorrow. He's not going to waste political capital on Fudge's legal challenge when he's planning something of his own. And Dumbledore? Dumbledore is, thinking. Harry paused. He's the most dangerous person in this equation, and he hasn't made his move yet. That worries me more than anything Fudge or Malfoy could do. Friday arrived with a cold rain that turned the grounds to mud and the castle's stone corridors slick with damp. Harry spent the morning in classes, Transfiguration, where McGonagall taught him to turn a match into a needle and gave him a look that suggested she was evaluating him for qualities beyond academic performance, and History of Magic, where Professor Binns droned on about goblin rebellions without any apparent awareness that one of his students had just conducted a political revolution of his own. Lucius Malfoy arrived at 2 o'clock. Harry met him in the unused classroom that had become his office, a deliberate choice. Not Dumbledore's office, which would suggest the headmaster's oversight. Not the Slytherin common room, which would suggest faction loyalty. A neutral space. Harry's space. Daphne was there, sitting in a chair to Harry's right, legs crossed, expression composed. They discussed whether she should be present and decided that yes, she should, partly because her political knowledge was invaluable, and partly because presenting a united front mattered. Malfoy entered, and the room's temperature seemed to drop. Not literally, though Harry half expected it, but the man carried an aura of cold authority that preceded him like a bow wave. He was tall, pale, and immaculate, his platinum blonde hair falling to his shoulders, his robes dark and expensive, his cane, topped with a silver serpent, gripped in black-gloved hands. His eyes swept the room. Took in the blackboard, the stacked parchments, the two 11-year-olds waiting for him. Something moved behind his gaze, assessment, recalculation, a predator adjusting its approach. Mr. Potter. His voice was silk over steel. Thank you for seeing me. Mr. Malfoy. Please sit. Malfoy sat. He did it the way he did everything, with precision, economy, and the unshakable confidence of a man who believed the world existed for his convenience. Miss Greengrass, he said, acknowledging Daphne with a small nod. I wasn't aware you'd be joining us. I wasn't aware I needed your awareness, Daphne said pleasantly. The ghost of a smile crossed Malfoy's face. Your father's daughter. Very well. He turned back to Harry. I'll dispense with the pleasantries, Mr. Potter. You've done something remarkable. Whether it proves to be remarkably brilliant or remarkably destructive remains to be seen, but it is, without question, remarkable. Thank you. I think. Let me be direct. The legal framework you've dissolved was imperfect. I won't pretend otherwise, I'm not Fudge, and I don't insult people's intelligence. The ministry was bloated, inefficient, and riddled with contradictions. Some of its laws were unjust. I will grant you that. That's generous of you. It's honest. But here is what concerns me, Mr. Potter. Malfoy leaned forward, and the pleasant veneer thinned enough to show the iron underneath. You've created a vacuum. And vacuums are dangerous, not because of what fills them, but because of who fills them. Right now, you are the sole authority in magical Britain. An 11-year-old boy with no political experience, no coalition, no institutional knowledge, and no mechanism for enforcement. I have the Regency. You have the title. Titles are symbols. They command respect only insofar as they can be backed by force, and you, Mr. Potter, have no force. No Aurors answer to you. No institutions support you. The goblins are on your side, but goblins have their own agenda, and their military power, while considerable, cannot be deployed within Wizarding Britain without triggering the treaty provisions that even your veto can't reach. Harry kept his expression neutral, but internally he acknowledged the hit. Malfoy was right, and they both knew it. So what are you proposing? Harry asked. An alliance. Malfoy's eyes glittered. My family has influence, resources, and institutional connections that you lack. I can provide the enforcement mechanism, the political coalition, and the practical infrastructure that your Regency needs to function. In return, you get to shape the laws that replace the ones I've voided. Malfoy smiled fully now, and it was a beautiful, terrible thing, warm and cold simultaneously, inviting and threatening. You're quick. I appreciate that. Yes, Mr. Potter. I want a seat at the table. Not the only seat, I'm not unreasonable. But a seat. The new legal framework will need to be built by someone, and I'd rather it be built by people who understand how power works. People like you. People like me. People who have spent their lives navigating the realities of governance, who understand that law is not about justice, it's about order. Justice is a lovely idea. Order is what keeps society from eating itself. Harry let the silence stretch. He could feel Daphne beside him, tense and still, her mind racing behind her composed exterior. He could feel the Regency's magic in his chest, warm and watchful, like a second heartbeat. Mr. Malfoy, Harry said. I've read the transcripts of the Wizengamot sessions during the last war. I know that you claim to have been under the Imperious Curse when you served Voldemort. The name landed like a slap. Malfoy's composure held, but barely, a tightening around the eyes, a stiffening of the shoulders. I also know, Harry continued, that you made significant financial contributions to Minister Fudge's campaign, and that those contributions coincided with the burial of several investigations into your wartime activities. I know that you sit on the Hogwarts Board of Governors, where you have blocked curriculum reforms, suppressed funding for Muggleborn scholarship programs, and threatened the removal of any teacher who teaches a version of recent history that doesn't align with your preferred narrative. Malfoy's expression had gone very, very still. I know these things because the goblins keep excellent records, and because Daphne spent 3 days pulling Wizengamot transcripts from the library. Harry paused. You're right that I need institutional support. You're right that titles without force are just words. But I am not going to hand the reconstruction of magical law to the man who spent the last decade corrupting the old system for personal gain. The room was silent. Rain hammered against the window. Malfoy's hand tightened on his cane. Harry watched the silver serpent's head flex under the pressure of his grip. Be very careful, Mr. Potter, Malfoy said softly. You are a child playing in a world you do not understand. I have been generous today, I came to you with an offer of partnership, not a threat. But my generosity has limits. So does my patience. Harry stood. He was shorter than Malfoy sitting down, and the height difference was almost comical, but something in his posture, something in the way the Regency's magic gathered around him like a cloak, made the size irrelevant. Your offer is declined. If you want to participate in the rebuilding of magical law, you can do it the same way everyone else will, by making your case in open debate, in full public view, with your arguments judged on their merits instead of your wallet. Malfoy stared at him. For a long, charged moment, Harry thought the man might draw his wand, the cane concealed one, Harry was sure of it, and Malfoy's body language had shifted from diplomatic to dangerous. Then Malfoy smiled again. This time it was colder, sharper, and Harry could see the calculation behind it, the shifting of strategy, the filing away of data, the reclassification of Harry Potter from potential asset to obstacle requiring removal. I see, Malfoy said. Then I suppose we understand each other. I think we do. Malfoy stood, straightened his robes, and walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the frame. A piece of advice, Mr. Potter. Free of charge. He didn't turn around. The people who change the world rarely get to enjoy the world they've changed. History remembers them fondly. Their contemporaries rarely do. He left. Daphne exhaled. It was the first sound she'd made since the conversation began, and it came out shaky. That went well, she said. He's going to try to destroy me. Obviously. How long do we have? Before he makes his first move. Days. Maybe less. He's patient, but you just humiliated him, and Malfoys don't forgive. He'll build a coalition, the old pureblood families, the ones with the most to lose from your reforms. He'll frame it as defending tradition, protecting magical heritage. He'll make it sound noble. And underneath? Underneath, it'll be about power. It always is. Daphne looked at him. You could have been more diplomatic. I could have. But he needed to know that I can't be bought. There's a difference between can't be bought and won't be reasoned with. We need allies, Harry. Real ones. Bones is a start, but she's one person. She stopped, frowning. Did you hear that? Harry listened. Beneath the rain, beneath the castle's ambient sounds, there was something else, a low, grinding vibration, like stone moving against stone. It lasted 3 seconds, then stopped. The castle, Harry said. Dumbledore mentioned it. The Regency's activation is affecting the magical infrastructure. Affecting it how? He wasn't specific. Corridors opening, wards fluctuating. Things that haven't happened in centuries. Daphne's frown deepened. That's not just political, Harry. That's structural. If the castle's wards are destabilizing, I know. I've asked Ragnarok for information on the Founder's anchors. Whatever's happening, the Regency triggered it. I need to understand what I'm dealing with. Another vibration. Longer this time, 5 seconds, 6. Somewhere in the distance, a suit of armor fell over with a crash. The torches in the corridor outside the classroom flickered. Soon, Daphne said. You need to understand it soon. Saturday morning, Amelia Bones arrived at Hogwarts. She came through the main gates, not the flu, a deliberate choice that Harry appreciated. Walking through the gates was a statement, I'm entering this castle as a guest, not an authority figure. This is your territory, not mine. It was the kind of subtle political signal that Daphne would have approved of. Harry met her in the entrance hall. She was a square-jawed woman with close-cropped gray hair and the posture of someone who had spent 30 years in law enforcement and had the scars to prove it. Her eyes were sharp and assessing, and they swept the entrance hall, the students, the staff, the general atmosphere, with the practiced efficiency of a career investigator. Mr. Potter. Madam Bones. Thank you for coming. I didn't have much choice. My department is held together with habit and hope, and both are running thin. She paused. Is there somewhere we can talk privately? Harry led her to his classroom office. Daphne was already there, she'd insisted on attending every meeting, and Harry hadn't argued because she was usually right. Bones looked at Daphne, then at Harry, and something in her expression shifted, not softened, exactly, but adjusted. She was recalibrating her expectations. You have an advisor. I have a partner, Harry corrected. Daphne Greengrass. Your father is Alexander Greengrass. He is, Daphne said. Neutral family. Smart family. Survival-oriented. Bones sat down without being invited, which Harry respected. She wasn't going to play the deferential guest. All right, Mr. Potter. Cards on the table. I need criminal law restored. Not in pieces, not in drips and drabs, I need a functional legal framework that allows my Aurors to arrest, detain, and prosecute criminals. I need it yesterday. You should have received my first batch of ratifications by owl. Murder, assault, theft, arson, fraud, I received them. They're a start. But they're not enough. I need procedural law, rules of evidence, standards for arrest, rights of the accused. Without procedure, the substantive laws are unenforceable. I can't just arrest someone for murder, I need the legal authority to investigate, the rules governing how evidence is collected, the standards for what constitutes proof. She's right, Daphne said. I know she's right. Harry ran a hand through his hair. Madam Bones, I voided everything because the system was rotten from the foundation up. I don't want to rebuild the same rot with a fresh coat of paint. Every law I ratify needs to be reviewed, debated, and justified. And while you review and debate and justify, criminals walk free. I have a suspected murderer in a holding cell who my lawyers tell me I can't legally detain because the detention statutes are void. I have a ring of dark artifact smugglers who've stopped even pretending to hide because they know we can't touch them. She stopped. Took a breath. When she spoke again, her voice was controlled, but the anger underneath was real. I have devoted my life to the rule of law, Mr. Potter. The old system was flawed, I won't deny that. I've spent years fighting against its worst excesses from the inside. But no system is worse than a flawed system. Anarchy doesn't protect the innocent. It protects the strong. The words hit Harry like a physical blow, because they were true and he knew it. He looked at Daphne. She met his gaze, and he saw his own conflict reflected in her eyes, the tension between the ideal and the practical, between what should be and what must be. I'll ratify procedural law today, Harry said. The full framework, arrest, detention, evidence, trial procedures, rights of the accused. All of it. Bones blinked. All of it. Without review? No, with review. But fast review. Daphne and I have been going through the statutes for 3 days. The procedural framework is mostly sound, the problems with the old system weren't in the procedures, they were in the substantive laws. The rules for how to conduct a trial are fine. The rules for who gets a trial are where the rot was. So you'll restore procedure but keep your veto on the substantive laws you object to. Exactly. Your aurors will have full legal authority to arrest, investigate, and bring suspects to trial. The laws defining what's actually criminal will be restored case by case, starting with the ones that are obviously necessary and moving toward the ones that need debate. Bones was quiet for a moment, turning this over. Then she nodded slowly. That's reasonable. More reasonable than I expected from the boy who blew up the legal system on a Wednesday afternoon. It was a Wednesday. I thought it was. Harry stopped. Never mind. There's something else. Sirius Black. The temperature in the room changed. Bones went very still. What about Sirius Black? He never received a trial. I'm aware of that. Under the Emergency Powers Act that allowed his detention without trial, which I have permanently voided, his imprisonment is illegal. It was always illegal, frankly, but now it's indefensibly so. I want him given a trial. A real one. With evidence and defense counsel and all the procedures I'm about to ratify. Bones stared at him. You're asking me to reopen a 10-year-old case involving the mass murder of 13 people. I'm asking you to give a man the trial he was denied. If he's guilty, the trial will prove it. If he's not, Harry let the implication hang. Mr. Potter, the evidence against Black, what evidence? There was no investigation. There was no trial. He was captured, charged, and sent to Azkaban within 72 hours. No witnesses were examined, no wand was checked, no veritaserum was administered. Bartemius Crouch signed the order, and that was that. Harry paused. I know this because I read the file. The goblins have copies of everything. Bones opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. How did the goblins get copies of DMLE case files? You'd have to ask them. I suspect the answer would be both illuminating and uncomfortable. There was a long silence. Then Bones let out a breath that sounded like it had been held for a decade. I've always known that Case was wrong, she said quietly. Crouch was, he was zealous. The war was ending, people wanted blood, and black was convenient. High profile. The right last name. She rubbed her face with both hands. If I reopen the case, every conviction from the Crouch era comes under scrutiny. Every detention order, every summary judgment. It'll be a cascade. Good, Harry said. Cascades clean things. Bones looked at him, really looked at him, the way she'd look at someone she was deciding to trust, and then she laughed. It was short, sharp, and surprised, as if it had escaped without her permission. You know, she said, when I heard what you'd done, I thought you were either a genius or a lunatic. I'm still not sure which, but I'm starting to think it might be both. She stood and extended her hand. You'll have the ratified procedural framework by Monday morning. By Sunday night. Then I'll file the motion to reopen the Black case on Monday. She shook his hand. Her grip was firm and calloused. Don't make me regret this, Mr. Potter. I'll do my best. She left. Harry sank into his chair and closed his eyes. That went well, Daphne said again, but this time she meant it. We need to move faster. Malfoy's building a coalition. Fudge is challenging the Regency's legitimacy. Dumbledore is doing whatever Dumbledore does. And the castle is coming apart at the seams. Then let's move faster. Daphne pulled the blackboard closer and began writing. Procedural law. Full framework. Let's get it done. They worked through Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening, and into Sunday morning. Tracy Davis brought food from the kitchens, the house elves were delighted to help, and seemed entirely unbothered by the legal chaos engulfing the rest of the magical world. Blaise Zabini appeared intermittently with intelligence updates, Fudge was losing support, Malfoy was meeting with the Sacred 28 families, Dumbledore had sent owls to the International Confederation of Wizards. At 2 a.m. on Sunday, Harry signed the final ratification document, 73 pages of procedural law, reviewed and approved, the Regency's magic sealing each provision with the weight of Slytherin's authority. He felt it flow out of him like water from a dam, spreading through the ley lines, reactivating enforcement enchantments across the country. Done, he said, and his voice was hoarse. Daphne was asleep in her chair. Her head was tilted to one side, her dark hair falling across her face, and for a moment she looked like what she was, a tired 11-year-old girl who had stayed up all night helping her friends save the world. Harry pulled a blanket off the back of a chair and draped it over her shoulders. She stirred but didn't wake. He sat back down, looked at the stack of completed ratifications, and allowed himself a moment of something that wasn't quite satisfaction but was in the neighborhood. Then he picked up the next file. There was always a next file. Sunday morning brought two things, a package and a warning. The warning came first, delivered by Neville Longbottom, who appeared at the entrance to Harry's classroom office looking like he'd swallowed a live frog, which, given his relationship with Trevor, was not entirely outside the realm of possibility. Harry, I need to talk to you. Harry waved him in. Daphne was still asleep in her chair. Harry had moved to the desk and was working through a stack of regulatory statutes, potion safety standards, magical creature handling protocols, the bureaucratic scaffolding of daily life that nobody thought about until it wasn't there. What's wrong? Neville sat down, fidgeted, and then spoke in a rush. My grandmother wrote to me. She's been talking to people. The Malfoys, the Knots, the other old families. They want to counter your regency, and they think they've found a way. Harry set down his quill. Go on. The other regencies. Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff. If other regents are activated, they can outvote you, or at least block your veto. My grandmother says the Longbottoms have a claim to the Gryffindor Regency. Through blood. We're supposed to be descended from Godric Gryffindor's line. And she wants you to claim it. Neville nodded miserably. She says it's my duty. She says my father would have done it. She says a lot of things about what my father would have done. Harry looked at Neville, really looked at him. At the round, uncertain face, the nervous hands, the shoulders hunched under a weight of expectation that no 11-year-old should have to carry. He saw himself, in a way, another boy being pushed toward a destiny he hadn't chosen by adults who cared more about the role than the person filling it. Neville, do you want to claim the Gryffindor Regency? I don't know. Gran says, I didn't ask what your grandmother says. I asked what you want. Neville went quiet. It was a different kind of quiet than his usual nervous silence, deeper, more deliberate. He was actually thinking, perhaps for the first time in a long time, about what he wanted rather than what he was supposed to want. I don't know, he said again, but this time it was honest instead of helpless. I don't understand what it means. What it would actually involve. Gran just says I should do it because it's my duty and because we need to stop you from, he stopped. From ruining everything? Her words were more colorful. Harry almost smiled. Neville, I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to think about it. Don't answer now, take your time. But think about it. Neville nodded. The Malfoys want you to claim the Gryffindor Regency because they want a counter to my power. They want someone they can control, someone who'll vote the way they want, block the reforms they don't like, and restore the old system with a fresh coat of legitimacy. Your grandmother isn't a Malfoy ally, but she wants the same thing for different reasons. She wants the prestige, the status, the proof that the Longbottoms still matter. Neville flinched, but he didn't deny it. Neither of them is asking what you would do with the power. Neither of them cares. You're a tool to them, a means to an end. Harry leaned forward. But the Regency is real, Neville. If you claim it, it's yours. Not your grandmother's. Not Malfoy's. Yours. And you'd have to decide for yourself what to do with it. What would you want me to do with it? That's the wrong question. The right question is what you would want to do with it. Harry paused. But if you're asking whether I'd see you as an enemy, no. Not unless you chose to be one. And I don't think you would. Neville stared at him. Something was happening behind his eyes, something slow and uncertain but growing, like a plant pushing through soil toward light. I'll think about it, he said. Good. And Neville, if you need to talk, about this or anything else, you know where to find me. Neville stood, nodded, and left. At the door, he paused. Harry? Yeah. For what it's worth, I think what you're doing is really brave. Scary, but brave. Thanks, Neville. I just wish I knew whether brave was enough. He left. Harry stared at the empty doorway for a moment, then turned back to his work. Daphne's eyes were open. She was still curled in her chair, blanket around her shoulders, but she was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. That was well done, she said quietly. He's a good person. Better than the people trying to use him. Most people are better than the people trying to use them. That's why they get used. She sat up, stretching. You think he'll claim the Regency? Eventually. But on his own terms, not Malfoy's. And if Malfoy finds someone else? Someone more compliant? Then we deal with it. Harry rubbed his eyes. One crisis at a time. That was when the package arrived. An owl swept through the window, not Hedwig, not a school owl, but a handsome eagle owl with dark plumage and cold yellow eyes. It dropped a parcel on Harry's desk and departed without waiting for a reply. The parcel was small, about the size of a book, wrapped in plain brown paper. No return address. No note. Harry looked at it. Something prickled at the base of his skull, not the scar, something else. Instinct. The animal wariness of a boy who had learned from 10 years with the Dursleys that unexpected packages rarely contained good things. "Don't touch it," Daphne said sharply. She was on her feet, wand drawn, her political composure replaced by something harder and more immediate. "Harry, don't, I wasn't going to." He drew his own wand. "Can you do a detection charm?" "I know 3, and I shouldn't know any of them at my age, so don't tell anyone." She moved to the desk, wand extended, and began casting. The first charm produced a faint blue glow around the package, magical, definitely magical. The second charm made the glow intensify and shift to an angry red. Daphne went white. Actually white, not the controlled pallor of her usual composure, but the bloodless shock of genuine fear. "It's cursed," she said. "Harry, that's a lethal grade curse." "If you'd opened it," she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Harry stared at the package. His heart was beating very fast, but his mind was very still, the clarity that came in moments of real danger, when the noise of the world fell away and everything reduced to simple, clean calculations. "Can you contain it?" I think so. There's a containment charm that," she began casting, her wand movements precise despite the slight tremor in her hand. A bubble of translucent blue energy formed around the package, sealing it. The red glow pulsed against the barrier like a heartbeat. "Good," Harry said. "Good. Now we need to," the containment charm cracked. Not broke, cracked, like ice under pressure, spiderwebbing with fracture lines. The curse inside the package was pushing against it, testing it, probing for weaknesses. Daphne's face was white, her jaw set, her wand arm shaking with the effort of maintaining the barrier. Harry could see the strain in her, 11 years old, pushing magic that was meant for adults, holding a lethal curse at bay through sheer willpower. He didn't think. He moved. His wand came up and he added his own power to the containment, not a specific spell, because he didn't know the specific spell, but raw magic, channeled through his wand and shaped by intent. The Regency's magic surged with it, adding weight and force, and the containment charm solidified, the cracks sealing over, the barrier thickening from translucent to opaque. The curse inside flared once more, then subsided. Contained. Safe. For now. Daphne lowered her wand. She was breathing hard, and her hand was shaking. That shouldn't have worked," she said. You can't just add raw magic to a structured charm. That's not how, apparently it is." She stared at him. Then she sat down heavily, her legs giving out less from exhaustion than from the sudden release of adrenaline. Her composure was gone, completely gone, and underneath it was a frightened 11-year-old girl who had just nearly died. Harry knelt beside her chair. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Her voice cracked. She pressed her lips together, hard, and Harry could see her fighting to reassemble her mask, to be the cool, collected political operator instead of the scared child. "You don't have to do that," Harry said quietly. "Not with me." Something in her expression broke. Not dramatically, Daphne Greengrass didn't do dramatic, but a small, precise fracture, like a crack in fine porcelain. Her eyes were bright, and she blinked rapidly, and she didn't cry, but it was a near thing. "Someone just tried to kill you," she said. "They tried to kill whoever opened that package. If you'd gotten to it first, don't." Her voice was sharp. "Don't do that. Don't make it about me. It is about you. You're in this now, really in it. And I need you to understand what that means. People are going to come after me. They're going to come after the people around me. If you stay, if you finish that sentence with, 'It'll be dangerous, I will hex you myself.'" She met his eyes, and the fear was still there, but it was being shouldered aside by something fiercer. "I knew what this was when I signed up, Potter. Don't insult me by pretending I didn't." They looked at each other. The contained curse pulsed softly on the desk, a heartbeat of malice trapped in blue light. "Okay," Harry said. "Okay," Daphne said. "We should probably report this." "Probably." Neither of them moved for a moment. The space between them was charged, not with romance, not exactly, not yet. They were 11. But with something. Trust, maybe. Or the beginning of it. The understanding that they had faced something terrible together and had come out the other side, and that this meant something that neither of them had the vocabulary for yet. Then Daphne stood, straightened her robes, and pointed her wand at her own face. A quick glamour charm restored her composure, color to her cheeks, steadiness to her expression, the mask snapping back into place. "McGonagall first," she said, "all business. Then bones. Then we find out who sent it." She nodded. "Then we find out who sent it." Professor McGonagall's reaction to the cursed package was volcanic. She swept into the classroom, took one look at the contained curse pulsing on the desk, and her expression went from stern to thunderous in a way that made the ambient temperature drop. "This was delivered by Owl. To a student? Inside the castle?" "Yes, Professor. The monitoring ward should have caught this. The male screening charms," she stopped. Her face went through a rapid series of expressions as she processed the implication. "The male screening charms are statutory enchantments." "And I voided all statutory enchantments," Harry said. The silence was brutal. "I'll ratify the school safety enchantments immediately," Harry said. "I should have done it first. That's my mistake." "Your mistake could have killed someone, Mr. Potter." "I know." McGonagall looked at him, and the fury in her face was complicated, directed at Harry, yes, but also at the situation, at the person who'd sent the curse, at the reality that an 11-year-old boy was sitting in a makeshift office managing the legal framework of a nation while someone tried to murder him. "I'll notify the headmaster," she said. "And I'll be contacting the DMLE. Whoever sent this will be found and prosecuted, assuming we still have laws against attempted murder. Ratified 3 days ago, Professor. Small mercies." She swept the contained package into a conjured case with the efficiency of someone who had, in her younger years, faced worse things than cursed mail. "Stay in the castle, Mr. Potter. Both of you." She looked at Daphne. "Miss Greengrass, your containment charm was exceptional work. 10 points to Slytherin. Now if you'll excuse me, I need to have a very loud conversation with the headmaster about the state of our security." She left, the case of cursed mail floating behind her like a malevolent balloon. Harry stood at the window and stared out at the rain. His hands were shaking again, delayed reaction, the adrenaline crash that came after the danger had passed. He jammed them into his pockets. "Harry." Daphne's voice was quiet. She dropped the surname. Neither of them commented on it. "I'm fine." "You're shaking." "I said I'm fine. And I said don't insult me." She came to stand beside him at the window. "Close, but not touching. Someone wants you dead. We knew this was possible. We planned for this. We planned for political opposition. We didn't plan for someone mailing me a lethal curse wrapped in brown paper. Same thing, different packaging. The question is who?" Harry thought about it. "Not Malfoy. Not directly, he's too smart to try something this crude. If he wanted me dead, he'd use someone untraceable, and he wouldn't do it the day after a face-to-face meeting that puts him at the top of the suspect list. Could be one of his allies. Someone acting independently, a zealot, a true believer in the old system. Or it could be someone we haven't considered. Someone who's not on our map." Daphne frowned. "What do you mean?" Harry thought about what Dumbledore had said, about the Regency being a key, about old magic and corridors opening. He thought about the door in the staircase wall that appeared and disappeared. He thought about the vibrations in the castle, the grinding of stone, the wards flickering. "The Regency isn't just a political tool," he said slowly. It's connected to something. The magical infrastructure, the anchors, the ley lines, whatever the founders built. I activated it, and things are happening that I don't understand. What if someone out there does understand? Someone who's been watching the anchors, waiting for them to be activated? Who would be watching? I don't know. But I intend to find out. He turned from the window and walked to his desk. The spot where the cursed package had sat was slightly scorched, the containment charm had left a mark on the wood, a perfect circle of blackened grain. He put his hand on it. The wood was warm. Tomorrow I'm going to the Chamber of Secrets, he said. Daphne's eyebrows rose. The what? Slytherin built a hidden chamber beneath Hogwarts. It's referenced in the Founders' Charter, obliquely, but it's there. If there's information about the anchors, about the Regency's connection to the magical infrastructure, that's where it'll be. And you know where it is? The Regency knows. He touched his chest, where the magic sat like a warm coal. It's been pulling me. Since the day I invoked the claim, I've felt it, a direction, a gravity. Downward. Below the castle. Harry, the Chamber of Secrets is a myth. And even if it's real, the legends say Slytherin left a monster in it. The legends say a lot of things. I need to see for myself. Daphne studied him. Then she said, with the absolute certainty of someone who has made a decision and will not be moved from it, I'm coming with you. It could be dangerous. Everything about this is dangerous. At least in the chamber, the things trying to kill us will be straightforward about it. She picked up her wand. Tomorrow, then. Tomorrow. But tomorrow had to wait, because Sunday evening brought another complication. Harry was in the Great Hall for dinner. He'd forced himself to attend, because visibility mattered, because he couldn't afford to look like he was hiding, when the doors opened and a figure strode in that made the entire student body go quiet. Lucius Malfoy was back. He shouldn't have been, the Board of Governors meeting was over, he had no reason to be in the castle, but he walked through the doors of the Great Hall as if he owned the building, and beside him was a woman Harry didn't recognize, tall, severe, dressed in dark robes with a ministry seal on the breast. Behind them came 4 Aurors. Dumbledore rose from the high table. Lucius. This is unexpected. Headmaster. Malfoy's voice carried across the silent hall with effortless projection. I apologize for the intrusion. I am here in my capacity as a member of the Board of Governors, accompanied by Dolores Umbridge, Senior Undersecretary to the Minister, and a security detail from the Auror Corps. Umbridge stepped forward. She was short, squat, and dressed in pink. She had a face like a toad and a smile like a paper cut. Good evening, Headmaster. The Ministry has filed a formal challenge to the validity of the so-called Slytherin Regency, and I am here to serve notification to Mr. Potter that his actions are under investigation. The hall erupted. Students were shouting, standing, trying to see. The teachers at the high table had drawn their wands, not pointed at anyone, but drawn, visible, a statement of readiness. Harry stood. The room felt very large and very small at the same time. Under investigation, he said. Under what authority? Umbridge's smile widened. It was the most unpleasant expression Harry had ever seen on a human face, and he'd grown up with Aunt Marge. Under the emergency framework ratified by the Wisingamat this week, which grants the Ministry temporary investigatory powers, which I approved, Harry said. I ratified the emergency framework. Including the investigatory provisions. I know exactly what powers it grants, Madam Umbridge, because I read every word before I signed it. Umbridge's smile flickered. Be that as it may, the investigatory powers in the emergency framework allow the Ministry to investigate allegations of criminal activity. They do not allow the Ministry to challenge the legitimacy of a founder's regency, because the regency predates the Ministry and operates outside its jurisdiction. Harry paused. Let that sink in. You are here under authority that I granted. You might want to keep that in mind. Malfoy's expression was unreadable. He was watching Harry with the intensity of a predator evaluating prey, and Harry could see the calculation behind his eyes, the real-time assessment of Harry's composure, his knowledge, his willingness to fight. The Ministry's position, Umbridge said, her voice tightening, is that the right of conquest as applied to the Slytherin Regency is legally questionable. You were an infant. You did not deliberately. Magic doesn't care about deliberation. It cares about results. This has been established precedent in magical law for over 1,000 years. If you'd like to challenge it, you'll need to find a legal basis in the Founders' Charter, which is the only document that has authority over the Regency, and I can tell you right now that no such basis exists, because I've read the Charter cover to cover. Twice. Silence. Every student in the hall was staring. Every teacher was watching. Dumbledore stood at the high table with his wand in his hand and an expression that was either approving or alarmed, possibly both. Umbridge's face had gone the color of an overripe plum. The minister can file whatever challenges he wants through the proper channels. But he cannot send ministry officials and aurors into Hogwarts to intimidate a student. That's not governance, Madam Umbridge. That's bullying. And I have considerable experience recognizing the difference. The 4 aurors looked uncomfortable. One of them, a young woman with spiky pink hair, was visibly trying not to smile. Malfoy spoke for the first time since the initial exchange. Mr. Potter. No one is trying to intimidate you. You're simply here with 4 armed aurors, during dinner, in front of the entire student body, to deliver a message that could have been sent by owl. This is theater, Mr. Malfoy. And I'm not your audience. Malfoy's composure cracked, just a hairline, just for a moment, and underneath, Harry saw genuine fury. Cold, controlled, but real. Harry had embarrassed him. Twice in 3 days. And Lucius Malfoy did not forget. This matter is not concluded, Malfoy said softly. I agree. But it's concluded for tonight. Harry looked at Dumbledore. Headmaster, if you'd be kind enough to escort our guests to the gates. It was audacious. It was possibly rude. And it was a masterstroke, because it positioned Dumbledore as following Harry's lead rather than the other way around, a subtle shift in perceived authority that everyone in the room felt. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. Just for a moment. Of course, Harry. He descended from the high table. Lucius. Dolores. If you'll follow me. Malfoy left. Umbridge left. The aurors left, the pink-haired one shooting Harry a quick, appreciative grin over her shoulder before she disappeared through the doors. The great hall was quiet for a long moment after they'd gone. Then, from the Gryffindor table, someone started clapping. The sound spread, through Gryffindor, into Hufflepuff, even some of the Ravenclaws joined in. The Slytherin table was more reserved, but Harry could see the looks on his housemates' faces, respect. Genuine, hard-won respect. Harry sat back down and picked up his fork. Well, Daphne said, that was terrifying. Which part? All of it. But especially the part where you told Dumbledore to escort them out. If he'd refused, you'd have looked like a child giving orders to the headmaster. He didn't refuse. No. He didn't. She looked at him sidelong. You were counting on that. I was counting on the fact that Dumbledore wants to be seen as supporting legitimate magical authority. The Regency is legitimate. If he'd refused, he'd have been siding with Fudge and Malfoy against the Founder's own charter. He couldn't do that, not in front of the whole school. You're thinking 3 moves ahead. I'm trying to. It'd be easier if the board would stop changing. She was quiet for a moment, eating her dinner with the mechanical precision of someone whose mind was elsewhere. Then she said, the cursed package and this, the same day. That's not a coincidence. No, it's not. Malfoy wanted to rattle you. Wanted you off balance when Umbridge delivered the notification. If you'd opened the package, if you'd been injured or, she didn't finish. If you'd been incapacitated, Umbridge would have walked in here unopposed. But I wasn't incapacitated. Because you caught the curse. So the question is, did Malfoy send the package, knowing it would fail, knowing I'd catch it, counting on the psychological impact? Or did someone else send it, and Malfoy's timing was coincidental? There are no coincidences in Slytherin. Daphne smiled. A real one. Small, private, meant only for him. You're learning, she said. That night, Harry couldn't sleep. He lay in his four-poster bed in the Slytherin dormitory, staring at the green-tinged ceiling, listening to the breathing of his dorm mates and the distant sounds of the castle settling. The lake pressed against the windows like a living thing, dark water rippling with currents that caught the faintest light and scattered it in patterns on the walls. The Regency's magic hummed in his chest. It had been growing stronger since the veto, not in raw power, but in presence. It was always there now, a second pulse running alongside his heartbeat, and sometimes, when the castle was quiet and his mind was still, he could feel it reaching out, tendrils of awareness extending through the stone walls, the ley lines, the hidden channels of magic that networked Hogwarts together. He felt the castle. Not metaphorically, literally. He could sense its wards, their patterns and fluctuations. He could feel the places where they were strong and the places where they were fraying. And he could feel something else, deep below, far beneath the dungeons and the lake bed, something vast and old and waiting. The anchor. Slytherin's anchor. One of the 4 foundational wardstones that held the magical infrastructure of Hogwarts, and, by extension, a quarter of magical Britain, together. It was unstable. Harry could feel it the way you could feel a toothache, a deep, persistent wrongness, a vibration that was just slightly off-key. The anchor had been dormant for centuries, and activating the Regency had woken it, and now it was running on power that hadn't been maintained or calibrated in 900 years. The corridors shifting. The wards flickering. The doors appearing and disappearing. It was all connected to the anchor, and the anchor was connected to Harry, and Harry was lying in bed at midnight with the weight of an institution older than most countries resting on his chest. He got up. Dressed silently. Left the dormitory and the common room and the dungeons, moving through the sleeping castle with the Regency's magic guiding his steps. He didn't plan where he was going. He let the magic lead. It took him down. Through corridors he'd never seen, past doors that opened at his approach and closed behind him, down staircases that spiraled into the bedrock beneath the castle. The air grew cooler, damper, heavy with the smell of stone and deep water. He found himself in a corridor that dead-ended at a wall. But it wasn't a wall, it was a door, disguised as stone, and carved into its surface was a serpent so detailed it might have been alive. Harry looked at the serpent. The serpent looked at Harry. It wasn't alive, it was stone, just stone, but the Regency's magic recognized it, and Harry felt the word rise in his throat without thinking, without deciding, as natural as breathing. He spoke in Parseltongue. Open. The wall dissolved. Behind it was darkness, and the sound of dripping water, and a staircase descending into the deep. Harry stood at the threshold and felt the anchor's pulse beneath his feet, stronger here, closer, a heartbeat of ancient magic that matched his own. Tomorrow, he would come back with Daphne. Tomorrow, he would explore. Tomorrow, he would find Slytherin's secrets and learn what the founders had built and why it was breaking. Tonight, he stood at the edge of the dark and felt the weight of everything he'd taken on, the political battles, the assassination attempts, the unstable magic, the castle crumbling, the ministry fighting, the world changing, and he let it press down on him, and he held. 11 years old. 2 months a wizard. The sole governing authority of magical Britain. And somewhere in the darkness below, something ancient was waking up. Harry turned around and climbed back toward the light. He had work to do in the morning. He had a country to rebuild, enemies to outmaneuver, allies to protect. He had Daphne, who challenged him and grounded him and nearly died for him without hesitation. He had Neville, who was braver than he knew and standing at the edge of a choice that would change his life. He had bones, who believed in law more than power and was willing to fight for both. He had the truth about Sirius Black, and the determination to see it heard. And he had the Regency, ancient, powerful, demanding, burning in his chest like a star that refused to go out. Harry Potter walked through the sleeping castle, and the stones of Hogwarts hummed beneath his feet, and somewhere in the depths, the anchor pulsed, and somewhere in the world above, the people who wanted to stop him were sharpening their knives. Let them come. He'd been fighting his whole life. This was just a bigger cupboard, with bigger bullies, and higher stakes. And Harry Potter did not lose. Chapter 3, The Price of Revolution. The Chamber of Secrets smelled like 1,000 years of silence. Harry descended the staircase with Daphne 2 steps behind him, their wands casting twin points of light that barely dented the darkness. The steps were slick with moisture, carved from raw bedrock, each one worn smooth in the center by feet that hadn't walked here in centuries. The air grew heavier with every step, not oppressive, but weighted, like breathing at the bottom of the ocean. Cheerful, Daphne murmured. You volunteered. I'm beginning to question my judgment. The staircase ended at a tunnel. The tunnel was circular, wide enough for 2 people to walk abreast, and its walls were covered in carved serpents that wound around each other in intricate patterns. In the wand light, they seemed to move, a trick of shadow and flickering luminescence, probably, but Harry's hindbrain wasn't convinced. They walked. The tunnel curved, descended, leveled out, then opened into a space that made both of them stop. The chamber was enormous. Not grand in the way of the Great Hall, no enchanted ceiling, no floating candles, but vast, stretching away into darkness that their wands couldn't penetrate. Massive stone pillars lined the central walkway, each one carved with serpents that climbed toward a ceiling lost in shadow. Water ran in shallow channels along the floor, black and still, reflecting nothing. At the far end, barely visible, a stone face rose from the wall. Salazar Slytherin, or at least someone's idea of him, ancient, severe, bearded, eyes closed as if sleeping. The carving was 40 feet tall. Well, Daphne said. He certainly wasn't modest. Harry felt the Regency's magic surge. It recognized this place, it sang with it, resonating like a tuning fork struck against its matching note. The anchor was here, somewhere below, and the chamber was built around it, or on top of it, or possibly through it. The magic was dense, layered, centuries of accumulated power compressed into the stone itself. He walked forward. The serpent carvings on the pillars began to glow faintly as he passed, a soft green luminescence that spread from pillar to pillar, lighting the chamber in stages, like a chain of lanterns being lit by an invisible hand. It's responding to you, Daphne said. The Regency. No, Harry, to you. The Regency is a title. The magic is responding to the person holding it. She was watching the lights with an expression caught between scientific fascination and reasonable terror. The founders built this place. They anchored their magic here. And now you're activating it just by being present. They reached the far end. The giant stone face of Slytherin loomed above them, and beneath it, set into the wall at ground level, was a door. Not hidden, simply there, as if it had always been waiting for someone to walk up and notice it. It was smaller than the serpent-carved entrance above, made of dark wood banded with iron, and it bore a single rune that Harry didn't recognize but that the Regency's magic translated instantly: study. Harry pushed the door open. Slytherin's private study was surprisingly modest. A room perhaps 20 feet square, with stone walls lined with shelves, a heavy desk, a chair, and a fireplace that had been cold for a millennium. The shelves held books, actual books, preserved by magic, their covers cracked but intact. The desk held parchment, quills, and a stone basin similar to the one at Gringotts. And on the wall behind the desk, carved directly into the stone in letters that glowed with the same green light as the serpent pillars, was a message. Harry read it, and his blood went cold. To whatever fool inherits this burden, the anchors are not decorations. They are load-bearing walls. They hold the ley lines in alignment and prevent the wild magic from surging. If any anchor fails, the others will compensate, but they will strain. If 2 fail, the system becomes unstable. If 3 fail, the wards of Hogwarts collapse and the ley lines destabilize across the island. I write this because I am leaving, and I do not trust my colleagues to maintain what we have built. Godric is brave and stupid. Rowena is brilliant and arrogant. Helga is kind and naive. Any one of these qualities is a liability in a keeper of ancient power. The anchors must be maintained. The regents must tend them. If a regent is absent, their anchor will sustain itself for a time, decades, perhaps centuries, but not forever. Without active maintenance, the anchors degrade. And when they degrade, the magic bleeds. If you are reading this, it means a Slytherin regent has returned to this place. Good. Tend the anchor. Restore the balance. And do not trust the others to do their part, they never have. Salazar Slytherin, he's delightful, Daphne said, reading over Harry's shoulder. Really warm and fuzzy. He's also right. Harry touched the wall, feeling the message vibrate under his fingertips. The anchors have been unattended for 900 years. All 4 of them. That's what Dumbledore was talking about, the corridors shifting, the wards fluctuating. The infrastructure is degrading. And you activating the Regency, woke the system up. But only 1/4 of it. 1 anchor responding to 1 regent, while the other 3 continue to decay. He pressed his palm flat against the stone. Through the Regency's magic, he could feel it, the Slytherin anchor, deep below the chamber, pulsing with power that was frayed at the edges, running on reserves that had been depleted over centuries of neglect. It's like, imagine a building held up by 4 pillars. 3 of them are crumbling. I just put weight on the 4th. Which means the 4th is now bearing more load than it was designed for. Yes. Which means the castle is less stable now than it was before you claimed the Regency. Yes. Daphne was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, very calmly, we need the other regents. Harry nodded. He'd already reached the same conclusion. 1 regent couldn't stabilize the system any more than 1 pillar could hold up a building. The founders had designed this for 4. Without all 4 active, the infrastructure would continue to degrade, and eventually, it would fail. Neville, Harry said. Gryffindor. He's already being pushed toward the Regency by his grandmother. If we can get him to claim it on his own terms, that's 1. What about the other 2? Dumbledore hinted at a Ravenclaw claim. And Hufflepuff. Harry frowned. I don't know. The Gringotts records might have information on surviving bloodlines. We'll need to check. But Harry, the political situation. If Malfoy's coalition gets control of the other regencies before we do, they can outvote you. 3 against 1. I know. And if the anchors fail before we get all 4 regents active, I know, Daphne. She stopped. Looked at him. He could see the worry in her eyes, real worry, not political calculation, not strategic concern, but the simple human fear of a friend watching another friend carry too much. Sorry, she said. I'm not trying to pile on. You're trying to make sure I see the whole picture. That's your job. He turned back to the shelves. Let's see what else Slytherin left us. They spent 2 hours in the study. The books were written in a mixture of Old English, Latin, and Parseltongue, the last of which Harry could read instinctively, the words resolving into meaning the moment he focused on them. Most were theoretical treatises on ward construction, ley line theory, and the mechanics of ambient magic. Dense, technical, and invaluable. One book was different. It was a journal, Slytherin's personal records from the final years before his departure. Harry read it in fragments, his Parseltongue fluency allowing him to decipher the cramped, angular script. The entries painted a picture of a man who was brilliant, paranoid, and increasingly isolated. Slytherin hadn't left because of a philosophical disagreement about Muggle-born students, or rather, that was only the surface. The real break had been about the anchors. Slytherin had wanted to restrict access to the anchor maintenance rituals, arguing that the knowledge was too dangerous to share widely. The other founders had disagreed. The argument had escalated, alliances had fractured, and Slytherin had eventually departed in a fury, taking his knowledge of the anchors with him and leaving a basilisk as a guardian. Because of course he had. A basilisk, Daphne said flatly. He left a 60-foot magical serpent in the basement of a school for children. In his defense, he probably expected his heirs to be able to control it. That defense is terrible and you should feel bad for making it. Harry almost laughed. Then something in the journal caught his eye, a passage near the end, written in a hand that was shakier than the earlier entries, as if Slytherin had been agitated or afraid. I have felt them searching. Not the others, someone else. Something in the spaces between the wards, probing the anchors, testing their defenses. I do not know what it is. I do not know what it wants. But I have strengthened my anchor's protections, and I leave this warning: the anchors attract attention. Power calls to power. When the Regencies awaken, something will come looking. Harry closed the journal. What? Daphne asked. Nothing. More warnings about the anchors. He slipped the journal into his robes. He would tell her about the last passage later, when he'd had time to think about what it meant. Let's get back. We've been gone too long. They climbed back through the tunnel and up the staircase. The serpent door sealed behind them, and the wall reformed, solid and seamless. Harry felt the chamber settle back into dormancy, not sleeping, not anymore, but resting. Waiting. They emerged into the dungeons near the Slytherin common room. Morning light was filtering through the lake windows, painting the corridor in ripples of green and gold. It was Monday. Harry had classes to attend, laws to ratify, and a country to keep from falling apart. Just another week. The consequences arrived by owl on Tuesday morning. Harry was in his makeshift office, working through a batch of regulatory statutes, building codes for magical structures, standards for broom enchantments, protocols for magical waste disposal, when Blaise appeared in the doorway with a stack of letters and an expression that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. Bad news, Blaise said. Several flavors of it. Start with the worst. A 13-year-old in Manchester brewed an unstandardized sleeping draught and put his entire family into a coma. The recipe was from a book that was previously banned under the Potions Safety Act, which you voided. He bought it openly in Nocturne Alley, which is currently operating without any regulatory oversight whatsoever. Harry set down his quill. Second, 2 Nifflers escaped from a magical menagerie in Devon because the containment wards were tied to the Magical Creatures Control Act, also voided. The Nifflers got into a Muggle bank. The Obliviators are handling it, but the containment protocols that would have prevented the escape in the first place no longer exist. I ratified the basic creature control framework last week. You ratified the framework for dangerous creatures. Nifflers aren't classified as dangerous. They're classified as mischievous, which falls under a separate regulatory schedule that you haven't gotten to yet. Harry stared at the ceiling. The stone was cold and ancient and entirely unsympathetic. And the third thing, he asked. Blaise hesitated. That, more than anything, told Harry it was bad. A werewolf named Remus Lupin was attacked last night. A group of wizards, vigilantes, not officially affiliated with anyone, found out that the werewolf registry had been dissolved and decided to take public safety into their own hands. They tracked down 3 registered werewolves and assaulted them. Lupin was the worst. He's in St. Mungo's. Harry's chair scraped back as he stood. Remus Lupin. You know him. He was. Harry stopped. He'd found the name in the Gringotts records. Remus Lupin. Friend of James and Lily Potter. One of their closest companions. A werewolf who had been systematically excluded from magical society by the very laws Harry had voided. He was my parents' friend. Blaise set the letters on the desk. The prophet is running the stories. All of them. The headline is Regent's Revolution Claims First Victims. There's an editorial calling for the immediate restoration of all regulatory legislation. Fudge is giving a press conference at noon. Harry stood at his desk, hands flat on the surface, and felt the weight of it. The boy in Manchester. The Nifflers. Remus Lupin, beaten by thugs who'd used the absence of law as permission to indulge their hatred. He'd known this would happen. In the abstract, sitting in Gringotts with Ragnarok, reading about regulatory frameworks in the library, he'd known that voiding every law would have collateral consequences. He'd planned for it. He'd prioritized the critical statutes, criminal law, procedural framework, basic safety regulations, and he'd been working through the rest as fast as he could. But he hadn't been fast enough. And people had paid the price. Harry. Daphne's voice, from the doorway. She'd been in the library when Blaise arrived, but word traveled fast in Hogwarts. She looked at his face and saw whatever was written there. I heard. I did this, Harry said. You didn't brew the potion. You didn't release the Nifflers. You didn't beat Remus Lupin. I created the conditions for all of it. I voided the safety regulations without having replacements ready. I voided the werewolf laws and left werewolves exposed to vigilante violence because there was nothing protecting them anymore. The werewolf laws weren't protecting them. They were persecuting them. And now they're being beaten in the streets. Is that better? Daphne flinched. Not visibly, she was too well trained for that, but Harry saw it in her eyes. He turned away. I need to fix this. Today. All of it. Harry, you can't ratify every regulatory statute in a single day. There are hundreds of them. They need to be reviewed, then I'll review them. All of them. Right now. That's not, Daphne. He looked at her, and whatever was in his face made her stop. People are getting hurt because I wasn't thorough enough. I don't get to take my time while a 13-year-old is in a coma and a man who was my parents' friend is in a hospital bed. The room was quiet. Blaise stood by the door, carefully not looking at either of them. Daphne stood in the middle of the room, her composure intact but her eyes showing the conflict underneath, the political strategist warring with the girl who cared about the boy in front of her. Then we do it together, she said. Not alone. You don't carry this alone. She pulled a chair to the desk, sat down, and began sorting the stack of unratified statutes into categories. After a moment, Blaise did the same. Tracy Davis appeared. She always appeared when there was work to be done, like a very quiet, very efficient ghost, and took the creature control regulations without being asked. They worked through Tuesday. Through Tuesday night. Through Wednesday morning. Harry signed ratification after ratification, his hand cramping, the Regency's magic flowing through him with each signature, reactivating enforcement enchantments across the country. Potion safety standards. Creature containment protocols. Building codes. Transport regulations. Magical waste disposal. Import controls. Advertising standards for magical products. He read every one. He didn't rubber stamp them. Where a regulation was reasonable, he approved it. Where it was discriminatory or excessive, he modified it, striking clauses, adding protections, rewriting provisions. It was exhausting, granular, unglamorous work, and it was the most important thing he had ever done. At 3 a.m. on Wednesday, he signed the last document in the stack, a regulation governing the minimum safety standards for magical fireworks, and set down his quill. His hand was shaking. His vision was blurred. The Regency's magic felt thin and stretched, like a muscle worked past its limit. Done, he said. Daphne had fallen asleep again, her head on her arms on the desk, surrounded by parchment. Tracy had left an hour ago, swaying with exhaustion. Blaise had gone at midnight, citing a principled objection to working past his bedtime. Harry looked at the stack of completed ratifications. He looked at Daphne, sleeping on the desk. He looked at his shaking hand. Then he picked up a fresh piece of parchment and wrote 2 letters. The first was to St. Mungo's, requesting a status update on Remus Lupin and informing the hospital that all costs for Mr. Lupin's treatment would be covered by the Potter estate. The second was to the Daily Prophet. It was short: to the editor, the Regent acknowledges that the transition period has caused hardship. This is not acceptable, and responsibility lies with me. Regulatory safeguards have been restored as of today. Going forward, no law will be voided without a replacement framework being ready for immediate implementation. The people of magical Britain deserve better than what they received this week, and they will get it. Harry Potter, Slytherin Regent. He sent both letters with school owls and then sat in the dark office, alone, listening to the sound of Daphne breathing and the castle settling around him. He thought about what Dumbledore had said: "The road you are on has been walked before, by people with the best of intentions, and it does not always lead where you think." He thought about Slytherin's message on the wall: "I do not trust my colleagues to maintain what we have built." He thought about 11-year-old hands trying to hold up a country, and wondered, not for the first time, not for the last, whether he had made a terrible mistake. Then he pushed the thought away. Not because it wasn't valid, but because dwelling on it wouldn't help the boy in Manchester or Remus Lupin or anyone else. The mistake, if it was a mistake, was already made. The only direction that mattered was forward. Harry pulled the next stack of files toward him: proposed new legislation, drafted by Daphne and Tracy, meant to replace the laws he'd vetoed with something better. Anti-discrimination protections for werewolves. Muggleborn rights legislation. Reform of the Azkaban system. He started reading. The sun came up. He kept reading. Thursday brought Professor Quirrell. Not in person, Harry had been avoiding the defense professor, whose turban smell and scar-prickling presence unsettled him in ways he couldn't articulate. But the man's name came up in a context Harry hadn't expected. He was walking to Charms, one of the few classes he still attended regularly, because Flitwick was an extraordinary teacher and because maintaining some semblance of normal student life felt important, when Hermione Granger fell into step beside him. "Potter." "Granger. I've been doing research." She said it the way other people said "I've been breathing," as a statement of continuous, inevitable fact. On the Founder's Charter. The original document. Harry slowed his pace. And there are references in the Charter to something called the Sentinel Protocol. It's mentioned 3 times, always in the context of the Anchors. The Charter says the Sentinels are responsible for monitoring the Anchor network and reporting any anomalies to the Regents. What are the Sentinels? That's the thing, I can't find out. The references are oblique, almost coded. But the way the Charter describes them, they sound like a department. An organization. Something that was supposed to exist permanently, separate from the Regencies, dedicated to monitoring the magical infrastructure. Harry stopped walking. A permanent organization dedicated to monitoring the Anchors. Yes. That sounds like the Department of Mysteries. Hermione blinked. The what? The Department of Mysteries. It's a division of the Ministry, the most secretive one. They study the fundamental nature of magic. Time, death, love, prophecy, the deep stuff. He paused. The unspeakables. How do you know about that? The goblins told me. And Daphne's been teaching me the Ministry's organizational structure. Harry frowned, thinking. The Department of Mysteries predates the modern Ministry. Nobody knows exactly when it was founded or by whom. What if it's older than anyone thinks? What if the unspeakables are the Sentinels, or descended from them? Hermione's eyes widened. Then they'd know about the Anchors. They'd have been monitoring them for centuries. And they'd know that I've destabilized the system by activating only one Regency. Harry, if they've been monitoring the anchors all this time, they might know how to stabilize them. They could help. Or they could have their own agenda. Harry thought about Slytherin's journal. I have felt them searching. Something in the spaces between the wards, probing the anchors. Hermione, can you keep researching the Sentinel protocol? Quietly. Don't ask anyone about it, just library sources. Of course. She hesitated. Harry, there's something else. Professor Quirrell. The hairs on the back of Harry's neck prickled. What about him? He's been spending time on the third-floor corridor. The one Dumbledore told us was forbidden. I've seen him there twice, late at night, when I was coming back from the library. He was examining the door at the end of the corridor. The one with the three-headed dog behind it. How do you know there's a three-headed dog behind it? Hermione went pink. I may have looked. Of course you did. Harry almost smiled despite the chill running down his spine. Don't go near that corridor again. And don't go near Quirrell. Why? What's wrong with him? Harry couldn't explain the scar, the prickling, the sense of something wrong that emanated from the defense professor like heat from a furnace. Not without sounding paranoid or delusional. Just trust me, he said. Please. Hermione studied him with those sharp brown eyes. Then she nodded. Fine. But you owe me an explanation eventually. Deal. She peeled off toward the library. Harry continued to charms, his mind racing. Quirrell. The third-floor corridor. The unspeakables. The anchors. Too many variables. Too many unknowns. And somewhere underneath it all, the basilisk in the chamber, sleeping in the dark, waiting for a master who spoke its language. The troll came on Halloween. Harry would later learn that it had entered through a ground-floor entrance whose wards had failed 3 days earlier, a casualty of the anchor instability that he hadn't detected in time. The creature had wandered through the castle's lower corridors, drawn by the smell of food and the vibration of 500 students gathered in the Great Hall for the Halloween feast. But Harry didn't learn any of that until afterward. In the moment, what he knew was this: the doors of the Great Hall burst open, Professor Quirrell staggered in screaming about a troll in the dungeons, and the entire school descended into panic. Dumbledore's voice cut through the chaos. Prefects, lead your houses back to the dormitories. Teachers, follow me to the dungeons. Harry was halfway to the door with the Slytherin contingent when he stopped. The Slytherin dormitories are in the dungeons, he said. Daphne went pale. The troll is in the dungeons. We're being sent straight toward it. Harry turned to the nearest prefect, a fifth-year named Gemma Farley who had the look of someone rapidly approaching the limits of her coping capacity. Don't take us to the dungeons. Keep everyone here until the teachers clear the troll. But Dumbledore said to go to the dormitories. Ours are in the same place as the troll. Use your head. Gemma hesitated, then nodded. She began herding the younger Slytherins back toward the tables. Harry watched, made sure they were moving, and then turned to Daphne. Hermione's not here, he said. Daphne looked around the hall. You're right. She wasn't at dinner. She's been in the library all afternoon. She might not know about the troll. Harry was already moving toward the doors. Daphne grabbed his arm. Harry, don't. The teachers are going to the dungeons, not the library. If the troll isn't actually in the dungeons, if Quirrell was wrong, or lying, it could be anywhere in the castle. He pulled free and ran. Behind him, he heard Daphne swear, a word that would have shocked her mother, and then her footsteps, following. They took the stairs 2 at a time, heading for the second floor and the library. The corridors were empty, everyone was either in the Great Hall or being herded to dormitories, and the silence was oppressive, broken only by their footsteps and their breathing and, distantly, something else. Thudding. Heavy, rhythmic, getting closer. The sound of something very large walking through a stone corridor. Harry and Daphne rounded a corner and found the troll. It was not in the dungeons. It was on the second floor, outside the girls' bathroom, and it was 12 feet tall, gray-skinned, flat-faced, and holding a wooden club the size of a small tree. It smelled like a sewer that had died inside another sewer. Its small, piggy eyes swiveled toward them with the dull surprise of a creature that operated on instinct and appetite and very little else. Hermione screamed from inside the bathroom. Harry didn't think. He moved. The first spell he cast was a levitation charm, Wingardium Leviosa, the most basic charm in the first-year curriculum, aimed not at the troll but at its club. The club flew upward out of the troll's grip, and the creature grunted in confusion, staring at its empty hand. Harry flicked his wand and the club came down. Hard. On the troll's head. The impact was enormous, a crack that echoed through the corridor and made the stones vibrate. The troll staggered, swayed, and didn't fall. Its skull was thick enough to absorb a blow that would have killed a human. It turned toward Harry with an expression that had graduated from confused to angry. "Oh, wonderful," Daphne said. She was beside him, wand out, and she fired a knockback jinx, flipendo, that hit the troll in the chest. It stumbled back a step. One step. Then it roared and swung its fist at them like a wrecking ball. They dove in opposite directions. The fist hit the wall where they'd been standing and punched a hole in the stonework. Rubble showered down. The troll pulled its arm free and swung again, this time at Daphne, who rolled under the blow with a grace that belied her age and fired another jinx from the floor. Harry was on his feet. The Regency's magic was surging, responding to the threat, and he could feel the castle around him, the wards, the stone, the ancient magic woven into every surface. He reached for it instinctively, without knowing what he was doing, and felt the corridor respond. The floor beneath the troll's feet shifted. Stone ground against stone, tiles separating, creating a gap that the troll's foot fell into. The creature stumbled, off balance, arms windmilling. Harry levitated the club again. This time he didn't drop it, he swung it, using his wand like a conductor's baton, driving the massive wooden weapon sideways into the troll's temple. The blow connected with a sound like a cannon shot. The troll went down. 12 feet and a ton of muscle hit the floor, and the impact shook the corridor hard enough to knock dust from the ceiling. The creature was out, not dead, but unconscious, its chest rising and falling with labored breaths that smelled like a compost heap. Harry stood over it, breathing hard, wand still raised. The Regency's magic was singing in his veins, electric and fierce, and for a moment he felt something he'd never felt before, the raw, intoxicating rush of power used well. Then it faded, and he was 11 again, shaking with adrenaline, standing over an unconscious troll in a ruined corridor. Hermione came out of the bathroom. Her face was streaked with tears and dust, and she was trembling, but she was alive and unhurt. You are you okay? You hit it with its own club. Twice. Are you okay? Hermione nodded. Then she burst into tears. Then she hugged him, which Harry found significantly more disorienting than fighting the troll. Daphne picked herself up from the floor. Her robes were torn at the shoulder and there was a bruise forming on her jaw where she'd hit the stone during her dive. She looked at the unconscious troll, looked at Harry, looked at Hermione sobbing into Harry's chest, and said, "When McGonagall gets here, I'd like to not be the one to explain this." McGonagall got there 30 seconds later, flanked by Snape and Quirrell. She took in the scene, the destroyed corridor, the unconscious troll, the 3 first years, and for a moment, her expression was nothing but raw, undisguised shock. Snape's eyes went to the troll, then to Harry. Something complicated moved behind his dark gaze, not quite respect, not quite fear, but something in the neighborhood of both. Quirrell was pressed against the wall, staring at the troll with theatrical terror. But Harry caught something else in the man's expression, a flash of calculation, quickly hidden, that had nothing to do with fear. And beneath the turban, Harry's scar throbbed like a second heartbeat. What happened? McGonagall demanded. The troll wasn't in the dungeons, Harry said. It was here. Hermione was in the bathroom. We dealt with it. You dealt with, Mr. Potter, you are a first-year student. You should have found a teacher, not, there were no teachers. They were all in the dungeons. If we'd gone for help, Hermione would be dead. McGonagall opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. 5 points to Slytherin, she said faintly. Each. 4, for sheer dumb luck and misguided bravery. I'll take it, Daphne said, gingerly touching her bruised jaw. They were escorted back to the Great Hall. Along the way, Harry fell back to walk beside Daphne. You're hurt. It's a bruise, Harry. I've had worse from falling off a broom. You were brilliant. She looked at him sidelong. The bruise was darkening, purple against her pale skin, and her robes were dusty and torn, and she looked nothing like the composed political operator who sat in armchairs and discussed Wizengamot faction dynamics. She looked like someone who'd fought beside him and hadn't flinched. So were you, she said. The floor thing, making the stones shift. That wasn't a spell. No. It was the Regency. Or the castle. Or both. I could feel the magic in the stone, and I just pushed. That's terrifying. Getting a lot of that today. She smiled. It was small and tired and genuine, and Harry memorized it the way he memorized important things, consciously, deliberately, because some things were worth remembering even when everything else was falling apart. The troll attack changed things. Not just because it demonstrated that the castle's wards were compromised, though it did, and Dumbledore's face when he learned that a troll had bypassed the outer defenses was a study in controlled alarm. Not just because Harry's fight with the troll became the talk of the school within hours, transforming his reputation from controversial political figure to 11-year-old who knocks out trolls with their own clubs. It changed things because it forced the question that everyone had been avoiding: the wards were failing. The anchors were unstable. And no amount of political maneuvering or legal reform could fix a problem that was fundamentally magical. Dumbledore called Harry to his office the morning after the attack. This time, the conversation was different. The grandfatherly veneer was thinner, the urgency underneath more visible. The troll entered through a breach in the eastern perimeter ward, Dumbledore said without preamble. That ward has stood unbroken since the castle was built. It failed because the anchor sustaining it is degrading. I know, Harry said. I found Slytherin's writings in the chamber. The anchors need active maintenance from the regents. One regent can't stabilize a 4-regent system. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose. You found the Chamber of Secrets. The Regency led me to it. And what else did you find there? Harry hesitated. He thought about the basilisk, sleeping somewhere in the chamber's depths. He thought about Slytherin's journal and the passage about something searching in the spaces between the wards. Enough to know we have a bigger problem than politics, Harry said. The anchors are failing. We need all 4 regencies active. Neville Longbottom may have a claim on Gryffindor. You mentioned a Ravenclaw claim. Something shifted in Dumbledore's expression, a tightening, almost imperceptible, that Harry wouldn't have caught a month ago. But he'd been learning to read people, really read them, and Dumbledore, for all his skill, was not quite as opaque as he believed. I do have a claim to the Ravenclaw Regency, Dumbledore said carefully. Through a distant connection to the Ravenclaw bloodline, supported by my position as headmaster and the castle's recognition of my authority. But you haven't claimed it. No. Why not? The old man was quiet for a moment. Then he stood and walked to the window, looking out over the grounds with an expression that was genuinely troubled, not performed, not strategic, but authentically uncertain. Because claiming a regency is not a neutral act, Harry. You've discovered that yourself. The moment I claim the Ravenclaw Regency, the political landscape shifts again. People will see it as a power grab, the chief warlock adding ancient founder authority to his already considerable portfolio. It will confirm every fear that Malfoy's coalition has been stoking about concentrated power. And Dumbledore turned from the window. And they would not be entirely wrong. Harry blinked. He hadn't expected that. I am an old man with a great deal of power, Dumbledore said. I have held that power for a long time, too long, perhaps. I have used it, I hope, for good. But I am aware of the danger. Every additional authority I claim makes it harder for others to check my influence. I have no heir. I have no successor. If I take the Ravenclaw Regency and then die, or am killed, what happens to it? The system becomes more fragile, not less. So you're not going to claim it? I didn't say that. The old man's eyes sharpened. I said I was aware of the danger. Awareness is not the same as inaction. If the anchors are truly failing, and I believe they are, then we cannot afford to leave the regencies vacant. Someone must claim Ravenclaw. I am the most qualified candidate. But I will not claim it without your agreement, Harry. We are, whether we like it or not, in this together. The regencies were designed to work as a council, not as competing autocracies. If I take Ravenclaw, I do it as your colleague, not your rival. Harry studied the old man. He thought about their first conversation, Dumbledore's offer of guidance, Harry's refusal. He thought about the genuine concern in Dumbledore's voice and the calculation that always lurked behind it. He thought about the fact that Dumbledore was right about the danger, and right about the necessity, and that both of those things could be true simultaneously. Claim it, Harry said. But I have conditions. Name them. First, no unilateral decisions. The regents deliberate. We discuss, we debate, we compromise. Neither of us overrides the other without discussion. Agreed. Second, the Regency doesn't give you authority over Hogwarts students. You're the headmaster, that's a separate role. Keep them separate. Dumbledore's mouth twitched. A reasonable boundary. Third, when the other regencies are claimed, we establish a formal charter. Rules of governance. Checks and balances. No single regent, including me, holds absolute power. The old man looked at him for a long time. And then he did something Harry didn't expect, he smiled. Not the twinkling, grandfatherly smile of public performance, but a small, private smile that carried something dangerously close to respect. You know, Dumbledore said, I once told someone that it is our choices, far more than our abilities, that show what we truly are. I think I may finally understand what I meant. He extended his hand. Agreed, Harry. On all three conditions. Harry shook his hand. The old man's grip was firm and dry, and his eyes were steady. I'll claim the Ravenclaw Regency at the next Wizengamot session, Dumbledore said. Which brings us to the matter of Gryffindor. Mr. Longbottom, I'm handling it. I see. And Hufflepuff? Working on it. Dumbledore nodded. He didn't press. And Harry left the office feeling, for the first time since this had started, like he might have an ally who was genuinely on his side. Or at least on the same side. There was a difference. Neville was waiting for him at the bottom of the staircase. The round-faced boy was standing with his hands in his pockets and his shoulders set in a way that was new, not hunched, not apologetic, but deliberate. He looked like someone who had made a decision and was still surprised by it. Harry. I need to tell you something. Walk with me. They walked. Through the corridors, past the moving staircases, out into the courtyard where the November air was sharp and the sky was the color of wet steel. Students gave them a wide berth. Harry Potter was no longer someone you approached casually, and Neville Longbottom, by proximity, had acquired a similar aura of significance. My grandmother is coming to Hogwarts tomorrow, Neville said. She's bringing a delegation from the Wizengamot. The Longbottom claim to the Gryffindor Regency has been verified by Gringotts, not independently. She went through Malfoy's people, but the goblins confirmed it. She wants me to claim the Regency at a public ceremony, with the Wizengamot as witnesses. And what does she want you to do with it once you have it? Neville's jaw tightened. Vote with Malfoy's coalition to restore the old legal framework. Block your reforms. Serve as a counterweight to your authority. And what do you want? Neville stopped walking. He turned to face Harry, and there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before, not confidence exactly, but the raw material of it. The rough shape of a spine being forged. I've been reading, Neville said. About the laws you voided. About the things you're trying to change. The werewolf laws. My parents were hurt by a Death Eater, Bellatrix Lestrange. She used the Cruciatus curse on them until they, his voice caught. He breathed. Continued. Until they lost their minds. And afterward, there were people who wanted to classify them as permanently incompetent under the Mental Capacity Act, a law that would have stripped them of their property, their legal rights, everything. My grandmother fought it. She won. But the law is still there, on the books, waiting to be used against someone whose family doesn't have enough gold to fight back. Harry said nothing. He let Neville talk. I want to claim the Regency, Neville said. But not for my grandmother. Not for Malfoy. For my parents. For the people like them, who got crushed by a system that was supposed to protect them. He looked at Harry. I want to claim it for the same reasons you did. Harry felt something loosen in his chest, a tension he hadn't realized he was carrying. Your grandmother won't like that. My grandmother will be furious. Malfoy will be worse. Malfoy can stuff it. Neville blinked, looking surprised by his own words. Then a grin crept across his face, uncertain, wobbly, but real. Sorry. I've been wanting to say that for weeks. Harry grinned back. Don't apologize. It's a good line. He sobered. Neville, this is going to be hard. Claiming the Regency puts a target on your back. People have already tried to kill me, a cursed package, last week. If you stand with me, they'll come after you too. I know. And it'll be lonely. Your grandmother's faction, Malfoy's people, they'll cut you off. You'll lose social support, political protection, Harry. Neville's voice was quiet but firm. I've been lonely my whole life. I've been the disappointing son, the almost squib, the boy who couldn't live up to his father's reputation. This is the first time I've had a chance to do something that matters, something that's actually mine. Not my grandmother's ambition, not Malfoy's strategy. Mine. He said it simply. Without drama. And Harry recognized the quality of the courage it took, not the spectacular, sword-waving kind, but the quiet, stubborn kind that showed up at the bottom of the staircase and said I've made a decision. Then let's do it, Harry said. Tomorrow. Your grandmother's ceremony. We'll use their stage, but we'll change the script. What's the plan? You claim the Regency. You make your own speech. You tell them exactly why you're doing it and who you're doing it for. And when Malfoy's coalition tries to direct your vote, you tell them no. That's not a plan. That's a dare. Best plans usually are. Neville laughed, a real laugh, full and surprised, like a bird that had been caged so long it had forgotten it could sing. Okay. Tomorrow, then. Tomorrow. They walked back to the castle together, and the sky above them was grey and cold and vast, and somewhere in the depths of Hogwarts, the Gryffindor anchor pulsed with a light that had been waiting a very long time for someone brave enough to claim it. Friday morning, Augusta Longbottom descended on Hogwarts like a well-dressed siege engine. She was a formidable woman, tall, angular, wearing a hat that appeared to contain an actual stuffed vulture, and carrying herself with the absolute certainty of a woman who had never been told no by anyone she considered worth listening to. Behind her came a delegation of 15 Wisengamot members, including 3 members of the Sacred 28, a ministry official Harry didn't recognize, and Lucius Malfoy. The ceremony was held in the Great Hall. Dumbledore had agreed to host it. Harry suspected the headmaster wanted to keep events under his roof where he could influence them, which was fair enough. The students were assembled as witnesses, the Wisengamot delegation occupied conjured seats near the high table, and the general atmosphere was one of barely suppressed political tension. Harry sat at the Slytherin table. Daphne was beside him. Blaise was 2 seats down, eating breakfast with the casual detachment of someone watching a chess match that didn't involve him. Neville stood at the front of the hall, next to his grandmother, wearing formal robes that looked like they'd been tailored for his father. They were slightly too big in the shoulders. Augusta Longbottom spoke first. Her voice was clear, practiced, and carried the particular authority of someone who had been managing the Longbottom family's political interests for a decade. Honored members of the Wisengamot. Students and staff of Hogwarts. We are here today to witness the formal invocation of the Gryffindor Regency by Neville Frank Longbottom, verified heir of the Gryffindor bloodline, scion of the ancient and noble house of Longbottom. She placed a hand on Neville's shoulder, proprietary, not affectionate. The Longbottom family has always stood for tradition, honor, and the proper governance of magical Britain. In these uncertain times, it is more important than ever that strong, principled leadership, Gran, Neville said. Augusta stopped. She looked at her grandson with the expression of someone who has been interrupted mid-sentence for the first time in living memory. I'll take it from here, Neville said. He stepped forward. Away from his grandmother's hand. Away from the delegation and their expectations. He stood alone at the front of the Great Hall, a round-faced 11-year-old boy in robes that didn't quite fit, and he looked out at 500 students and 15 of the most powerful people in magical Britain. He was shaking. Harry could see it from the Slytherin table, the fine tremor in Neville's hands, the set of his jaw, the way he kept his chin up through sheer force of will. But he was there. He was standing. And when he spoke, his voice carried. My name is Neville Longbottom. I am here to claim the Gryffindor Regency. He paused. Behind him, Augusta's face was shifting from surprise to suspicion. I'm not doing this because my grandmother told me to. I'm not doing this because Lucius Malfoy's coalition wants a puppet regent to counterbalance Harry Potter. I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do. The hall was dead silent. At the delegation table, Malfoy's expression had gone from polished neutrality to something much more dangerous. The founders built this school, and this country's magical infrastructure, on the idea that power should serve people, not the other way around. For 900 years, the regencies have been dormant, and in that time, the people in charge have built a system that serves themselves. Werewolves are persecuted. Muggleborns are second-class citizens. People are sent to prison without trials. And the people with the power to change it, his eyes moved to the delegation, to the Wisengamot members, to his grandmother. They didn't. Augusta Longbottom's face had gone the color of old parchment. Her hand was gripping her bag so tightly that the leather was creaking. Harry Potter claimed the Slytherin Regency and tore the system down because no one else would. I'm claiming the Gryffindor Regency to help him build something better. Neville took a breath. I am not a puppet. I am not a counterweight. I am a regent, and I will serve the people of magical Britain on my own terms. He closed his eyes. The hall felt it, everyone felt it, the moment the magic answered. It was different from Harry's invocation, less serpentine, more leonine, a surge of warm golden light that blazed from Neville's chest and radiated outward, making the candles flare and the enchanted ceiling crack with invisible lightning. Neville's eyes opened. They were different, steadier, calmer, as if the Regency's magic had settled something inside him that had been rattling loose his entire life. The Gryffindor Regency is active, he said quietly. And I stand with Harry Potter. The hall erupted. Augusta Longbottom stood up. Her face was a mask of fury and, underneath it, something that might have been fear. She opened her mouth. "Sit down, Madam Longbottom," Harry said. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't stood up. But the Regency's magic carried the words through the hall with an authority that had nothing to do with volume, and Augusta Longbottom sat down. She looked stunned. Not by the command itself, but by the fact that her body had obeyed it before her mind had decided to resist. The Regency's magic was old enough to predate defiance, old enough to remember a time when a regent's word was law in the most literal sense. Harry stood then, and walked to the front of the hall. He stood beside Neville, and the two of them faced the room together, Slytherin green and Gryffindor gold, two 11-year-old boys carrying the weight of 1,000 years. 2 regencies are active, Harry said. 2 more remain. The anchors are stabilizing, I can feel it already. But we need all 4. He looked at Dumbledore. The old man met his gaze, nodded once, and rose from the high table. "I will be claiming the Ravenclaw Regency at the next Wizengamot session," Dumbledore announced. "The matter of Hufflepuff remains open. If any heir of Helga Hufflepuff's line is willing to step forward, they will be welcomed." Malfoy stood. His composure was intact, barely, visibly, the mask showing cracks at the edges, and his voice was perfectly controlled. "This is a coup," he said. "Dressed in the language of reform, wrapped in the founders' names, but a coup nonetheless. 3 regencies, aligned against the elected government of Magical Britain. The elected government of Magical Britain hasn't had a free election in 40 years, Harry said. Hereditary seats outnumber elected ones 3-1. The last minister was chosen by a backroom deal between 6 families, of which yours was one. Don't lecture me about democracy, Mr. Malfoy. You've never practiced it." Malfoy's mask cracked. Genuine fury blazed through, hot and sharp, and for a moment Harry saw the man underneath the politician, the Death Eater, the believer in blood purity, the aristocrat who considered the entire world his property. "You will regret this, Potter," Malfoy said softly. "All of you will." He turned and walked out. The delegation followed, except for 2 Wizengamot members who remained seated, looking thoughtful. Augusta Longbottom was the last to leave. She stopped at the door and looked back at her grandson. Neville met her eyes. He didn't flinch. Augusta's expression went through something complicated, anger, pride, fear, loss, and then she turned and left without speaking. Neville let out a breath that shook his entire body. "You okay?" Harry asked. "No," Neville said. "But I think that's how it's supposed to feel." "Yeah," Harry said. "It is." That evening, Daphne's letter arrived. Harry found her in his office, sitting in her usual chair, holding a piece of cream-colored parchment with her family's seal on it. Her face was blank, not composed, not controlled, but genuinely, frighteningly blank, the way a face goes when all emotion has been shut down because feeling any of it would be too much. "Daphne?" She looked up. Her eyes were dry. That was worse than tears would have been. "My father's been visited," she said. Her voice was flat, precise, emptied of inflection. "By representatives of the Knott family. On behalf of Lucius Malfoy." Harry sat down across from her. He didn't touch her. He didn't speak. He waited. "They've made an offer. Astoria, my sister, she's 9. They've offered a betrothal contract. Astoria to Theodore Knott, to be formalized when she turns 11. In exchange, my family gets protection. Political cover. Financial guarantees. And if your father refuses? Then the Greengrass family's neutral status becomes a liability. Our business contracts, we import potions ingredients, most of our clients are allied with Malfoy's faction, would evaporate. Our seat on the Wizengamot subcommittee for trade would be challenged. And my father." She paused. "My father would be reminded that neutrality in a war is a luxury that can be revoked. A betrothal contract. For a 9-year-old. Welcome to pure-blood politics." Harry's hands were clenched on the armrests of his chair. He could feel the Regency's magic responding to his anger, a surge of heat, a pressure in the air, a vibration in the walls. "I'll stop it," he said. "How?" "It's a private family matter. The Regency doesn't give you authority over, betrothal contracts are legal instruments. Legal instruments require statutory basis. I voided every statute." Harry leaned forward. "No betrothal contract is enforceable in magical Britain right now. Not Astoria's, not anyone's. And when I rebuild the legal framework, I will personally ensure that forced betrothal of minors is outlawed." Daphne stared at him. The blankness in her face cracked, and underneath it was something raw, gratitude and fear and something else, something she wasn't ready to name but that burned in her eyes like blue fire. "Harry, you can't. Malfoy will see this as a direct attack on pureblood tradition. The sacred rights of the old families. You'll lose whatever support you still have among the neutrals. Then I'll lose it. I'm not going to let them sell your sister to buy your father's obedience. It's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple." He held her gaze. "Some things aren't negotiable, Daphne. Some things aren't political. Your sister is 9 years old. That's the line." Daphne's composure broke. Not dramatically, she didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't throw anything. She just stopped holding herself together. Her shoulders dropped. Her hands unclenched. Her breath came out in a long, shuddering exhale, and she looked, for just a moment, like the 11-year-old girl she was instead of the political operative she trained herself to be. "My father will fight it on his own," she said quietly. "He's stubborn. Greengrasses don't bend. He doesn't have to fight it on his own. He has us." She looked at him. And then she said something that she'd never said before, in a voice that was small and fierce and absolutely certain, "Thank you, Harry." He wanted to reach for her hand. He didn't. They were 11, and the moment was too fragile, and some things needed time to grow before you could touch them without breaking them. "You're welcome," he said. They sat in the office, in the quiet, and outside the window the sun went down over the black lake, and the castle hummed with magic that was older than memory, and somewhere in the corridors of Hogwarts, something was moving that neither of them could see. The attack came at midnight. Harry was walking back to the Slytherin dormitory from his office, alone, because Daphne had gone ahead an hour earlier and Blaze didn't work past 10 on principle. The corridors were empty, the torches low, the castle settling into its nighttime rhythms of creaking stone and distant whispers. He felt them before he saw them. The Regency's magic pulsed, a sharp, sudden spike, like a warning bell ringing in his chest. Harry stopped walking. His hand went to his wand. 3 figures materialized from the shadows of a cross corridor. They weren't students. They weren't teachers. They were adults, dressed in dark robes without insignia, faces obscured by charms that blurred their features into smudges of shadow. They moved with the coordinated precision of people who had done this before, 2 flanking, 1 advancing, wands drawn. Harry's first thought was Death Eaters. His second thought was that these people moved too cleanly for Death Eaters, no theatrical masks, no dramatic posturing, no calling cards. This was professional. "Mr. Potter," said the lead figure. The voice was flat, genderless, modified by a Vochi's charm. "You need to come with us." "Do I?" "The Regency is destabilizing the anchor network. You are aware of this. We can help, but only if you cooperate." "Who are you?" "People who understand what you've awoken. People who have been watching the anchors for a very long time. The Sentinels. The Unspeakables." Harry felt the connection click into place, Hermione's research, Slytherin's warning, the shadow presence that had been probing the anchors for centuries. "If you wanted to help, you could have sent an owl," Harry said. "You could have requested a meeting through proper channels. Instead, you ambushed a student in a school corridor at midnight. That doesn't suggest cooperation. That suggests coercion. We don't have time for proper channels. The anchors are stabilizing. 2 regencies are active. We're working on the other 2. You don't understand. The lead figure stepped forward, and there was urgency in the altered voice, genuine urgency, or a very good facsimile. The anchors aren't just ley line junctions. They're seals. They were designed to contain something. And your activation of the regencies is weakening the containment. Harry felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty corridor. Slytherin's journal, I have felt them searching. Something in the spaces between the wards. Contain what? He asked. Come with us, and we'll explain. No. The lead figure tilted their head. The 2 flanking operatives shifted, subtle adjustments in stance that Harry recognized from his reading about dueling, combat-ready positions. Mr. Potter, this is not a request. Harry's wand came up. The Regency's magic surged to meet his intent, flooding his arm, his hand, his wand with power that felt ancient and vast and absolutely certain. Funny thing about people who say, this is not a request, Harry said. They always seem surprised when the answer is still no. The lead figure raised their wand. Harry moved first. He didn't cast a spell, he channeled. Raw magic, shaped by the Regency, poured through his wand and into the stone floor. The corridor responded. The flagstones heaved like a wave, buckling upward between Harry and the 3 attackers, forming a barrier of broken stone that forced them to scatter. The flanking operative on the left fired a stunner. Harry sidestepped. The Regency's magic gave him a sense of the castle's geometry, a spatial awareness that made dodging feel instinctive, and fired back with a knockback jinx that hit the operative in the chest and sent them crashing into the wall. The second flanker came at him from the right, casting silently. Harry caught the spell on a shield charm, Protego, first-year curriculum, basic as breathing, and felt it hold. The charm shouldn't have stopped a trained adult's curse, but the Regency reinforced it, and the shield blazed gold-green, solid as iron. The lead figure vaulted the stone barrier and came at Harry with a sequence of spells that Harry couldn't identify, nonverbal, fast, clinical. Harry dodged the first, shielded the second, and felt the third graze his shoulder with a sensation like ice water. Pain. Sharp, freezing, spreading through his arm. His left hand went numb. He switched his wand to his right and kept fighting. The corridor was a mess, broken stone, scattered debris, spell light flashing in the darkness. Harry was outmatched in skill and experience. He knew it. The attackers knew it. But he had something they didn't, the castle. Harry slammed his free hand against the wall and pushed his magic into the stone. Hogwarts responded with the eagerness of a war dog unleashed. The wall behind the lead figure erupted outward, blocks of masonry launching themselves at the attacker like cannonballs. The figure dove, rolled, came up casting, but they were off balance now, reactive instead of proactive. Harry pressed the advantage. He pulled at the ceiling, and the stones groaned, dust raining down, the weight of the castle above them trembling. The lead figure looked up, assessed the threat, and made a calculation. Withdraw, they said, and the 2 flanking operatives, one still crumpled against the wall, the other nursing a shield burn, grabbed their fallen colleague and disapparated. Inside Hogwarts. They disapparated inside Hogwarts. That was supposed to be impossible. The anti-apparition wards were among the most fundamental protections the castle had. The fact that these people could bypass them meant one of 2 things: either the wards had degraded further than Harry realized, or these people had access to the wards themselves. Harry stood in the ruined corridor, breathing hard, his left arm numb from shoulder to fingertips, and stared at the spot where his attackers had vanished. Something glinted on the floor. A badge, torn from the lead figure's robes during the explosion of masonry. Harry picked it up with his right hand. It was small, silver, and stamped with a symbol he recognized from Hermione's research, an archway, stylized, containing a single eye. The Department of Mysteries. The Unspeakables. Harry pocketed the badge. He stood in the wreckage, alone, and felt the castle settling around him, injured, angry, protective. The stones vibrated with a low hum, and he could feel the Slytherin anchor beneath his feet, pulsing faster now, agitated, like a heart under stress. The anchors aren't just ley line junctions. They're seals. They were designed to contain something. What had the founders sealed away? What had Slytherin felt searching in the dark? And why were the unspeakables, the people who should have been maintaining the system, trying to kidnap the one person capable of stabilizing it? Harry's arm throbbed. The numbness was fading, replaced by a deep, burning ache. He needed to see Madame Pomfrey. He needed to tell Daphne. He needed to tell Dumbledore. But first, he needed to think. Because the game had just changed. This wasn't politics anymore, wasn't Malfoy's maneuvering or Fudge's bluster or even Dumbledore's ideological fencing. This was something older, deeper, and more dangerous than any of them had imagined. Something was sealed beneath the anchors. Something the founders had trapped. And the unspeakables either wanted to keep it contained or set it free, and Harry had no idea which. He pulled out Slytherin's journal. Read the last entry one more time. When the Regencies awaken, something will come looking. Harry tucked the journal away, straightened his robes, and limped toward the hospital wing. Tomorrow he would deal with the unspeakables. Tomorrow he would find out what the anchors were sealing. Tomorrow he would face whatever was coming with his eyes open and his wand ready. Tonight, he had survived. And for now, that would have to be enough. Madame Pomfrey healed his arm with a warming charm and a potion that tasted like burnt rubber, and she did it with the grim efficiency of a woman who had stopped being surprised by student injuries and had progressed to being perpetually outraged by them. "Nerve freeze curse," she said, examining the damage. "Nasty piece of work. Another inch to the left and you'd have lost use of the arm permanently." "Where did this happen?" "Third floor corridor." "And who?" "I'd rather not say yet, Madame Pomfrey." She looked at him over her spectacles, a look that combined professional concern with the dangerous irritation of a healer being denied information she considered medically relevant. "Mr. Potter, I am obligated to report injuries sustained under suspicious circumstances. Report it to Professor Dumbledore. He'll want to know." "He certainly will." She handed him the potion. "Drink all of it. And come back tomorrow for a follow-up. Nerve freeze can have delayed complications." Harry drank the potion, suppressed a gag, and left the hospital wing. It was nearly 2 in the morning. The castle was silent, deeper than usual, as if Hogwarts itself was holding its breath. He found Daphne in the common room. She was sitting in her chair, wide awake, wrapped in a blanket, with a book in her lap that she obviously wasn't reading. "You're hurt," she said, before he'd spoken. "How did you? You're favoring your right side and your left sleeve is singed." "Sit down." He sat. He told her everything, the 3 figures, the fight, the badge, the unspeakables' claim about the anchors being seals. Daphne listened without interruption. When he finished, her face was the color of chalk, but her voice was steady. "Seals," she repeated. "The anchors are seals. Containing something. That's what they said. And they wanted to take you. Not kill you, take you. They could have killed me. They didn't try. The spells were designed to incapacitate, not destroy. Then they need you alive. Which means you have something they want, information, or the Regency itself, or the ability to do something they can't. The anchors respond to the regents. If they're trying to do something with the anchors, stabilize them, adjust them, use them, they might need a regent's cooperation. Or a regent's compliance." Daphne's expression hardened. "Harry, this changes everything. Malfoy is a political threat. The unspeakables are something else entirely. They have resources we can't match, access to the Ministry's deepest secrets, magical knowledge that's been accumulated over centuries, and apparently the ability to operate inside Hogwarts. I know. We need help. I know. Real help. Not just us and a blackboard. Harry thought about it. He thought about Dumbledore, who had genuine power and the experience to use it. He thought about Amelia Bones, who had the DMLE and the moral authority that came with decades of principled service. He thought about Neville, who had the Gryffindor Regency and the stubborn courage that Harry was beginning to realize might be the most important quality a person could have. He thought about Hermione, who was smarter than all of them and was probably, at this very moment, reading a book that contained the answer to a question none of them had thought to ask. Tomorrow, Harry said. I'll talk to Dumbledore about the unspeakables. I'll write to Bones. And I'll reach out to someone else, someone who might know more about what's sealed under the anchors. Who? Harry hesitated. The name felt strange on his tongue, the name of someone he'd never met, someone who had been locked in a cell for 10 years, someone who might be innocent or might be a mass murderer, and whose story was so tangled up in Harry's own that pulling on one thread risked unraveling both. Sirius Black, he said. My godfather. If anyone knows what the Founders sealed away, if anyone has access to the kind of old, dark knowledge that the pure-blood families guard, it's the Blacks. And Sirius is the last one. Daphne's eyes widened. He's in Azkaban. Not for long. Bones is reopening the case. And I have a feeling that when Sirius Black gets out of prison, if he's innocent, if he can be freed, he's going to have a lot to say. Harry, this is a lot of threads to pull at once. I know. But they're all connected. Malfoy, the unspeakables, the anchors, whatever's sealed beneath them, it's all one thing. One problem with 100 faces. And if we don't get ahead of it, he stopped. Breathed. If we don't get ahead of it, everything we've built, every law we've reformed, every injustice we've corrected, every person we've protected, it all goes away. Daphne was quiet for a long moment. The common room was dark, the lake windows showing nothing but black water and distant, ghostly light. Then we get ahead of it, she said. Together? Obviously. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. But right now, you need sleep. You look terrible. Thanks. That wasn't a compliment. I know. Stop smiling. I'm not smiling. You are. It's annoying. But she was almost smiling herself, that tiny, controlled curve of her lips that Harry had learned to read like a headline. Go to bed, Potter. The world will still need saving in the morning. Harry went to bed. He lay in the dark, listening to the castle breathe, feeling the anchor pulse beneath him, and thinking about seals and secrets and the things that waited in the spaces between. Sleep came slowly, and when it did, he dreamed of a door at the bottom of a staircase, and beyond it, darkness that was not empty, and a voice that was not human, whispering, "You opened the lock. Now see what comes through." He woke gasping, his scar burning, the taste of ash in his mouth. Dawn light filtered through the lake windows, green and gold, and somewhere above him, Hogwarts shuddered like a sleeping giant turning in its dreams. Harry dressed, pocketed his wand, and went to face the day. There was work to do. There was always work to do. And the darkness at the bottom of the stairs was getting closer. But Harry Potter had never run from the dark. He'd lived in it for 10 years, in a cupboard under the stairs, and it hadn't broken him. Nothing would. Chapter 4, What Lies Beneath 10,000,12,000 Words Primary Challenge, Large-Scale Threats plus Emotional Stakes. Director Croaker steps out of the shadows. Harry is brought to the Department of Mysteries, where Croaker shows him the truth: the Founders' anchors are destabilizing. If they fail, Hogwarts wards collapse, the Statute of Secrecy frays, and the magical infrastructure of Britain begins to unravel. Croaker's solution: surrender the Regency to the unspeakables, who can stabilize the anchors. His motivation is half genuine concern, half naked ambition. Harry refuses. He doesn't trust concentrated power, that's the whole point. The Voldemort thread, Quirrell's behavior becomes erratic. Voldemort's shade, drawn by the Regency's activation, grows more aggressive. Harry begins feeling the connection through his scar, amplified by the Regency. Flashes of Voldemort's hunger, his fury, his desperate need to reclaim what he considers his. The emotional core, Harry and Daphne's most vulnerable scene. Harry confesses his fear, that he's in over his head, that people are suffering because of his choices, that maybe the adults are right and he should have left things alone. Daphne's response anchors him, the world was broken before you touched it. You didn't cause the rot, you just ripped off the wallpaper. Dumbledore's power play, Dumbledore formally activates the Ravenclaw Regency, claiming it as a safeguard and counterbalance. Harry sees it for what it is, a power grab by a man who believes only he can steer the world. Their confrontation in the Wizengamot chamber is the story's most intense scene of dialogue, two visions of governance, two philosophies of power, laid bare before the entire magical government. Climax, Voldemort/Quirrell makes his play. He attacks Harry directly, trying to forcibly seize the Slytherin Regency through the blood connection. The battle is magical and visceral, Hogwarts itself responds, the castle shaking as the Regency holder and the blood heir clash. Harry defeats Quirrell. Voldemort's shade flees, but not before whispering, the Regency is mine by blood. You hold it by theft. I will come for what is mine. Ends with, Harry standing in the wreckage, the Philosopher's Stone destroyed, understanding for the first time the full scope of what's coming. Voldemort will return. And when he does, the Regency will be the prize. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.